On the side of a rural highway in Russia, a strange statue carved from wood is firmly planted in a field of brown grass, surrounded on three sides by a low wooden barrier and flanked by a park bench on either side. The statue serves to commemorate a series of bizarre events that took place here beginning in the late 1980s, affectionately named Alyosha, or Defender of Men, by the locals. The nearly 6-foot-tall statue depicts a squatting humanoid creature with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a large balloon-shaped head with bug-like eyes. And yet, as out of place as this display may seem in such a rural and desolate area, it is far from the strangest feature of this region, which has come to be known as the Perm Anomalous Zone, or the Molyobka Triangle. On this week's episode of Let's Get Haunted, we'll travel deep into the rural locality of Molebka, Russia, a town with a small population of just 300, but with a paranormal history that's larger than life.
Welcome back to Let's Get Haunted
with your host,
Nat Strawn
and Allie. Welcome back, Haunties, to episode 247 of Let's Get Haunted. We are your hosts, Allie and Nat, and we're here to get you good and haunted every single Wednesday for about 1 to 2 hours. And if you're new to the show and have no idea what our show is, Nat's going to tell you all about it right now.
We make haunted content, guys, every single week, switching off. That means this week, Allie is telling you a story, but next week, I'm going to tell you a story, and we both have different interests, different styles, so you never know what you're going to get.
It's true, but you know you're always going to have a good time. I really recommend putting this show on as you're trying to fold your laundry or do some other chore that you really don't want to do, and just pass the time with us, all right? Because we have a long format podcast.
I like to think of our show as like, it's not like brain rot that you feel bad about. Lemon. Like, it's not destroying your brain in the same way that just like watching a bunch of reels back to back with like flashing colors and lights destroys your brain. Instead, it's like a slow unraveling. If you were to just take a thread from a scarf and pull for approximately an entire year, you know, we all have that like old raggedy scarf or hat or pair of socks where it's like so thin that you can see through it. That's what this podcast does to your mind.
It's so funny you say that because recently I've just found myself opening Reels, Instagram Reels or TikTok and just mindlessly scrolling when I'm trying to do something else. I need to respond to an email, but my reflex is to open social media. And I was like, God, this shit is destroying my brain. It's destroying my mind. And then I researched today's story and I feel fully activated. I am so excited for today's topic. And there are tons of videos and photos that go along with this episode. Way too many to fit in a photo dump for Instagram. So if you guys want to follow along with us, you should definitely check out the video version of this week's episode on either Spotify or YouTube. Otherwise, I will try to fit as many images in as I can in the Instagram carousel photo dump, which you can check out at Let's Get Haunted on Instagram. But just in case there's somebody who refuses to watch the video version and also refuses to get Instagram, this slideshow that Nat is going to be flipping through during this episode, I'm going to have a link to it in the show notes below. So that's your fourth and final way to follow along with these images.
Wow. So accommodating.
All right. So today's episode is all about the Molyobka Triangle, Russia's very own paranormal hotspot. Also known as the Perm Anomalous Zone, or the M Triangle, this isolated stretch of wilderness has become legendary for its unexplained phenomena. Over the past few decades, it's been the setting for UFO sightings, claims of missing time, reports of strange creatures, monsters, and cryptids, and other assorted high strangeness events. Imagine a place with the UFO lore of Roswell, the creepy woods vibe of the Blair Witch, and maybe even a dash of Bigfoot sprinkled in. That's the Molyobka Triangle. In this episode, we'll be delving into the history and mystery of the so-called M Triangle, exploring how a quiet village became a magnet for paranormal investigators, scientists, tourists, and of course, conspiracy theorists. Dun dun dun! This is insane, this story that I'm about to tell you guys. And when I was researching it, I could not believe that I could not find a single other podcast that's covered this topic. I'm not saying they haven't done it. Maybe I just didn't come across it for whatever reason. But the only thing in English I could find about this topic was a 1994 TV series that I found a clip of.
Tonight on Sightings from the Russian Republic, our team of investigators captures startling videotape images and returns with eyewitness evidence of bizarre extraterrestrial contact.
We'll watch it later. But that's it. A 1994 American TV show. It's the only thing I could find. And so to do this episode, I have to give a very special shout out to our friend Christina. Our friend Christina is from Russia, and she helped me understand because a lot of the sources for this week's episode are in Russian. I bought a book. I was trying to use Google Translate. It only gets you so far. And so really want to give a special shout out to our friend Christina. Thank you so much for speaking both English and Russian. What would we do without you?
Christina, thank you. I also can only speak in an Italian accent.
I was about to say.
That's it. Sorry, guys. That's what you're getting. So just be happy.
And Christina really is just a fabulous human for the work that she did on this episode for us, because I had to join Telegram groups that were all written in Russian. I had to figure out how to download a PDF of a free conspiracy theory book that was written in Russian that's only sold on some weird Russian website that I couldn't understand. And I'm pretty sure it just stole my credit card information.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, how many times did you get scammed?
For sure, more than once. But can you go to the first slide? So the first slide is just says the Molyobka Triangle. The next one says different names, same place. If you're watching the video version of this week's episode, all these slides will be up as we're talking about them. But before we get into this story, I just need to talk about the name of this location, because there are so many names for this one location, and it can be kind of confusing. So the first name is the Molyobka Triangle. Then there's the Molebka Triangle. Then there's the M Triangle, the M Zone, the Zone, or the Perm Anomalous Zone. So if you've ever heard any of these phrases before, it's all about one singular location. Tell me, what do you think about all of these different names? Which one is your favorite? I kind of like the Zone. That seems kind of cool to just be the Zone.
The Zone is sort of Britney Spears. It also sounds like a cool club. Honestly, I'm aroused by the Molyobka Triangle or whatever. Guys, I love Russian thing. Any culture that's not mine. But the appropriate answer would be the Perm Anomalous Zone, because I feel like I almost understand what that is. An anomalous, is that anomaly? And perm, is that permanent? Is it the permafrost anomalous zone?
You're leading me so well into the next slide, if you can go to it right now, because Perm Anomalous Zone refers to the state that this thing is located in. It's called Perm Krai. So you can see in the next slide, I have a map of Russia, and then you can see Perm is highlighted. Basically, Russia, there's no time to explain, but it's made up of oblasts and Krais. I love maps. If you're new to the show, I really, really love a good map. I
feel like your love of maps at first, just like the 7,000-year-old town we learned about several seasons ago, just made me angry for some reason. I don't know. I just didn't like it. But now I'm starting to understand maps. I feel like my brain is starting to adjust to them, and I'm starting to be I get it, and I'm starting to like it too. It's a super easy task to feel like you checked off,
Yes. I understand a map. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's true, though. It's true. And for those of you who've been with us for a really long time, I cannot research any topic at all until I understand where it is on a map. I don't know why. It's probably a disability, but it's fine. We're not going to talk about it. If you're not familiar with Russian geography, that's okay. All you need to know is that most countries are made up of states and provinces, right? Russia is made up of these things called Krais and oblasts. And when I was trying to figure out what's the difference between a Krai and an oblast, basically every source was well, there's really no difference, but actually there's a big difference, and there's really no way to know which one is which. But it seems like an oblast is more populated, maybe it has big built up cities in it and infrastructure, and a Krai is more rural. But whatever the case, Molyobka, which is spelled two different ways, you can either find it on Google Maps by looking up Molyobka or Molebka, and it's located in the lower right-hand corner of Perm Krai, which, as we just said, Krais are usually more rural. If you look at that bottom right photo, can you describe it to our audience?
Yeah, so it's basically, you know what it looks like is it just looks like a river in Missouri or something. I live in I live in the US, guys, and so that's what it looks like to me. I've never been to a Krai or an oblast. But yeah, there's a river and it's so beautiful. It's lush. It looks like, you know what? I'm going to speak in my horse girl terms. This is a floodplain, and I can tell it is because you can see how when the river would flood, it would sort of swallow up that whole neighborhood next to it. And that's why everything is so lush and beautiful. Beautiful trees. I'm seeing deciduous trees and cumulus clouds and cirrus and cumulus.
Yeah, lots of clouds, lots of trees. You're right, that is a floodplain, by the way, so good call. We're going to read some quotes eventually from people who have lived in this area before, and one of the quotes talks about the floodplain, so very, very good call.
Oh my God.
See, you're good at geography, dude.
I feel like I'm unlocking different parts of my brain. Like, all I had to do was be like, okay, fine, maps are not that bad. And now I know what a fucking floodplain is? Okay.
Okay, now move on to the next slide. And this is the entrance to the town of Molebka.
Oh.
Very, very rural. Like, the infrastructure is not, I don't want people to think of paved highways. This is gravel roads. It actually didn't used to look like this at all. But as we're going to learn, because of some stuff that happened in Molebka, it got more popular. And so the town invested in gravel so that it could accommodate all the tourists that were coming.
Just off the top of my head, guys, from the floodplain picture above, like, I was thinking like suburban neighborhood, but now that I'm seeing the close-up, this is not suburban neighborhood. Allie's saying rural. Rural to me means like away, far away from a city, but this also looks like, I mean, from what I can tell, the houses, they don't look very well kept. Like, they look like very like patched up, and some of them are leaning, like missing portions of them. And I don't know if they've been like abandoned or if that is just what houses in this part of Russia look like, but it looks like, I don't know, like kind of derelict.
You're actually right on the money. We're going to talk about why the town looks the way it looks. But you're right. I mean, it's these ramshackle homes. They look like, most of them look like it's probably just one big room. It's cabin style, made out of wood that's been cut down from the surrounding forests. It's very much, I mean, I know I keep saying rural, but I really can't think of a better word.
This title isn't hard to understand, right?
No, it's awesome. I love that we can work while we're on cocaine.
It's pastoral, perhaps. It's countryside vibes, but it's not like a rich celebrity moves to the countryside and pretends to be a farmer because they're a billionaire. This is like actual people that are working blue collar very hard, growing their own food. It's very far away from civilization. If you were to look up the word strong in the dictionary, a picture of me would appear as an antonym. But this year, my New Year's resolution is to fix that. To be honest with you, I have reached the point in my life where I don't really care what I look like physically, but I do care how I feel. And I struggle to open pickle jars and Gatorade bottles. I'm being serious. It's gotten to the point where actually for Christmas, my brother got me this like mechanical contraption that will open jars for you. And that's great. And I love my brother and thank him very much for getting me that. But I would like to be able to have enough muscle mass that I can open things myself. So this year, I'm changing up my routine and using VERACITY's metabolic protein powder to start getting some of those sweet, sweet gains. That's right, this podcast is sponsored by VERACITY. Welcome to an all-natural way to get the protein you need. VERACITY is revolutionizing health by tackling the root cause of so many issues, metabolism. With VERACITY's drug-free, clinically proven, and doctor-formulated solutions, you can support your body's needs to live your healthiest life. I started using VERACITY in January, and it's so easy. Just 2 scoops with breakfast, and I feel energized and like a bad bitch all day. And soon, I will be opening jars up unassisted. I just know it. VERACITY founder and CEO Ali Egan is a certified hormonal health coach. Her personal experience with metabolic issues inspired her to develop holistic solutions for achieving optimal health. So, what's the secret to VERACITY's metabolic protein powder? The key ingredient is MyoVera, which amplifies your body's ability to use protein more effectively. I feel like everywhere I look is an ad for protein, but this is the only natural option I've found that also focuses on metabolism. So get the protein in your diet the natural way with VERACITY. Head to veracityhealth.co and use code HAUNTED for up to 45% off your order. Once again, that's veracityhealth.co for up to 45% off. And make sure you use the promo code HAUNTED so they know we sent you. And now back to your regularly scheduled haunting. right, so now we enter Part 1, a backdrop of bloodshed. Although Molyobka, which is also sometimes called Molebka, has less than 400 people living in it now, it is estimated that about 100,000 tourists visit each year in hopes of having their own supernatural experience. But long before the rural town became a mecca for paranormal enthusiasts, it still had an ancient mystical reputation. The name Molyobka traces back to a large stone located along the Silva River that local indigenous people once used as a ritual site. Among the Mansi people, who lived in this region long before Russian settlement, religious practices weren't centered around temples or shrines, but around natural features in the landscape. Stones, riverbanks, and forests could become sacred places where offerings were left and prayers were made to the spirits believed to inhabit the land. When Russian settlers arrived and observed these indigenous rituals, they realized that the large stone on the riverbank was spiritually significant to the Mansi people. Thus, they began referring to it as a Molebny stone or prayer stone. Over time, that description stuck. The nearby river became known as the Molebnaya River or Prayer River, and eventually the settlement itself inherited the name Molyobka. Haunties may remember from past episodes that much of Russia is divided up into oblasts and krais, which are basically the equivalent of states or provinces. Today's story takes place in Perm Krai, a large region on the western flank of the Ural Mountains, about 900 miles east of Moscow. Molyobka is a village located within Perm Krai, considered the epicenter of the strange phenomena we'll be discussing today. Because of its location within Perm, it's sometimes called the Perm Anomalous Zone, the Molyobka Triangle, the Molebka Triangle, and the M Zone. Perm is considered a transitional zone between Europe and Asia, marked by dense taiga forests, rivers, and the occasional rural village like Molebka. Historically, Perm was a frontier of the Russian Empire, rich in natural resources. While it has a very tiny population today, it was actually pretty bustling in the 1780s when an ironworks factory was opened by the rich Demidov family. The Demidovs are actually really interesting because even though they had no royal blood, they became noblemen because of their skills. Nikita Demidov was a blacksmith who impressed the Russian Tsar Peter the Great in the late 1600s. Nikita Demidov was so skilled at making weapons that the Tsar personally backed and funded him, granting the blacksmith exclusive mining rights, tax exemptions, serfs to use as labor, and permission to build factories across the Ural Mountains. This made the Demidov family the largest iron producers in Russia and the main supplier of weapons for the Russian military. By the 1700s, the Demidovs produced up to 40% of Russia's iron ore. One of the iron factories owned by the Demidovs was located right here where today's story takes place in Molyobka. So let's go to the next couple of slides. So the next slide, I've just got two more photos of the town. So one is in summer and one is in winter, if you want to just briefly describe it.
Yeah, so pretty. So we're looking again at the floodplain. Guys, no time to explain. Google what a floodplain is. But essentially, it's like a very just lush area that gets flooded often. And so the ground there is really soft. It's a good place for the horses to be. They like it. They like the grass that grows there. It feels good on their feet. And I guess it's also very haunted. There's also a sick-ass rainbow in this photo.
So pretty.
Yeah, that's cool. Beautiful place. And then the next one I am seeing, there's snow everywhere. Beautiful once again. It looks like maybe the river freezes over and gets snow on it, which I love. I love wintry things. Obsessed with that. And then the next picture looks like the Windows screensaver. I don't know was that Windows 95 or Windows
98, I think.
98. The one where it's just like the lush green plain with like the perfect clouds in the sky and all that. Yeah. It's just really nice. Beautiful, picturesque. Wow. I'm feeling really good. And I like thinking about that hot family who makes weapons and stuff.
Oh, I'm going to show you some pictures of the Demidov dynasty in just a moment. But yeah, if you go to the next slide, I knew you would be aroused. I was like, okay, this is the perfect episode because Russian accents, big mountain men. Yeah. Creatures that we're going to learn about that are possibly also big and burly, like Floodplains?
You guys...
I didn't know you liked those, but, it makes sense.
I love a floodplain, if you know what I mean. But yeah, here's the thing. I'm like an old woman at this point with 2 children. I need a whole backstory to get into any sort of mood at all. Like, I literally need like 5 hours of backstory before I'm turned on. And so I love a story like this.
We need a little bit of plot, To get the plains flooded, we need a little bit of plot. And that's exactly what the M Zone provides. So if you go to the next slide, you can actually see the plains flooded.
Wow, the plains are flooded. Okay, here I'm seeing this does look like a Steven Spielberg film of like children with rucksacks on their back and stuff just walking down a trail in the middle of the floodplain. And yep, then the next one is there's kind of giving like Oregon Trail, when you have to like cross a river and like
ford the river.
So that's interesting. Why are they crossing and why do we have pictures of them? Are they the stars of the story?
So many people visit here every year, and we'll talk at the very end about whether or not people are still coming as frequently as they were during the boom era of the late 80s, early 90s. But people come here and they hike to these specific locations where people have seen these monsters, aliens, UFOs land in some of these areas, allegedly, and you can just like see them. And there's tons of photos of these UFOs landing. I mean, it's kind of crazy. That's what I'm saying, is I really can't believe that I could not find more English sources for this story. It's really impressive. So I think that this person crossing the river, I think, is probably a hiker that's going to one of these remote locations where anomalous stuff happens. Yeah, and then if you go to the next slide, I just briefly wanted to show you, because at the very beginning during the hook, I talked about this alien statue located at this place.
Wow, this is crazy looking. This is the opposite of aroused for me. I do not like this thing.
Do you want to describe it briefly?
Yeah, all the work we just did, the backstory has now been eliminated with this. Yeah, this, God, I hate this. Honestly, don't know where to start. I can't tell if it's short, if it's tall, but it's just like this. It looks like an alien. It looks like a naked, genderless, like no genitalia humanoid being with arms that are just straight, and it's sort of kneeling down on one knee and the other foot is down. So it's like on one knee and one foot sort of crouching, and then its face has these like terrible, huge eye sockets. But the eye sockets are kind of like slit. They have like horizontal slits going across them. And it's hideous. It's the opposite of everything I want. Yeah. It's not giving himbo. Wait, okay, so in this next photo, so one of the photos, it looks like it's copper or wooden, and then the next photo, it looks like it's silver or like painted silver.
So this statue, it is carved out of wood. It was made by a woodsman named Viktor Sazonov in the 2010s.
Tell us more about him.
Could not find a picture of this guy, unfortunately, but the statue is kind of this tourist destination for people in Russia. If you look, you can actually see pictures of it on Google Maps. So when you look at Molebka on Google Maps, you know how usually there's a street view? In Russia, it's way harder to find street views, and it's nigh impossible to find street views in some of these more pastoral Krais. It's mostly only in the oblasts. And so when I was looking at Molebka, there's only 2 locations that you can drop down, as like when you're on Google Maps and you drop down the little person and see what's around on Street View. So you can see one of the locations is this statue. So the locals call it Alyosha or Alashenka. And I asked our friend Christina, I was like, why does everything in this story have 2 names or more? And she said that Alashenka is just like, it's sort of like in Spanish when you add ito at the end of a name, it's like cute. You know what I mean? Like, it's endearing. It's like, instead of Pedro, it's Pedrito. Instead of Alyosha, it's Alashenka. So it's like, oh, it's just my little Alyosha, my sweet little Alyosha, which means defender of men. So it's a male name. And this guy, Viktor Sazonov, he creates this wooden statue. And it's been there now for a couple of decades. And so in that second slide where you're seeing the silver, basically the statue is degraded. And so they'll repaint it every once in a while to kind of hide some of the flaws, or like mold from water getting into it, or people graffitiing on it, or whatever the case may be. And then the next slide, you can see the Mansi people, which we just talked about. So this is the group of people that historically have occupied this region prior to the Demidov dynasty coming in and creating this ironworks that we're going to talk more about in a minute. And then underneath, you can see the prayer stone, which is actually more of like a cliff, but it's how the city got its name, or the town got its name. So Molebny means prayer stone, and it's this giant sort of cliff face rising out of the river. So then if you go to the next slide, you're about to see the Demidovs.
Oh, this is terrible. I've made a terrible mistake. I have made a terrible mistake. Okay, so this is I'm looking at a portrait. It's a painting, and it says Nikita Demidov. And I don't know what's wrong with them, guys, but there's something physically, I don't know how to say, like, would you say incorrect? Looks like he's missing half his skull.
His skull is flattened for sure. There's nothing in the literature I read about why he looks this way, so I don't know if the portrait painter was just mad at him and made him look like he has a flattened head, or if maybe, I don't know, he was a blacksmith, like a super skilled blacksmith, maybe like a steel beam hit him on the head. I really don't know. And then next to him is his Nepo great-grandson, who looks like George Washington.
He's got great-grandson has like a very familiar head shape, but that original one, you guys, I'm not being a bitch here. I'm saying, like, it looks like someone squished his head, and that enough would be, I could get around that. I could get around a lot of stuff, guys, but it's also like he's missing half of his hair at the same time on that part of his head. You know what it looks like? It looks like a cross section, like when someone's showing you, like, this is how a pimple, or this is how the hair follicle under your skin, like, this is, and they, like, it's a cross section so you can, like, see into somebody's skin or whatever. This is like you're seeing into his brain or something. Or for Allie, here's language you'll understand. In The Sims, when you put it on, like, the 3/4 view. Look, guys, point is, this guy looks fucked up, all right?
And
I'm not
better
turned on
days
anymore, and I feel bad for him. Nice.
Well, you don't have to feel bad for long, because it turns out the Demidovs were not great people. The Demidovs may have had humble working class beginnings originally, but it didn't take long for them to become famous for all the wrong reasons. For one, the Demidov factories were literally nicknamed Hell by the people who worked there. Across the Ural Mountains, Demidov ironworks were infamous for brutal conditions, constant injuries, deaths, deafening noise and pollution, fire, smoke, and a glow that emanated from the buildings 24/7, so much so that they turned the night sky red. To the workers who broke their backs within the factory walls, the Molyobka factory was literally hell, with fire and brimstone raining down on them each day. There were even rumors that serfs who attempted to run away or carry out uprisings were flogged, shackled, and even executed, buried in unmarked graves near furnaces, forests, and even thrown into abandoned mine shafts. The Demidovs were also rumored to hoard their wealth by burying it, as they didn't trust the banks. And spoiler alert, after their factories all shut down, locals observed unexplained pits opening near old factory grounds, sudden unexplained cave-ins, and the discovery of secret passageways that snaked underground in incomprehensible patterns. Were the Demidovs building these confusing tunnel systems under the factories to confuse robbers who might be looking for their hidden wealth? Or were they being used to hide illegal practices during inspections, or even being used as makeshift prisons for misbehaving workers? Nobody knows for sure, but these are just some of the rumors still discussed in local taverns near the now abandoned factories. So if you look at that slide that has Nikita Demidov and his great-grandson, his great-grandson is the guy who headed the factory that was built in Molebka. Underneath these two portraits of these two Demidov dudes, I have two drawings of their factories. So they had multiple factories all throughout the Ural Mountains because Peter the Great was like, hey, this family's super skilled. I need a lot of weapons. You guys seem to know how to do blacksmith shit. So I'm going to give you all this money. I'm going to give you basically indentured servants, and you're just going to create all these factories. I'm going to give you a bunch of tax breaks. breaks, you're going to make a shit ton of money, and in exchange, I get all of the weapons you make. So they built these factories, and they had to be located on rivers because that's how they drew their power. And so that's why this location in Molebka was selected as one of the locations of their factory.
I get it now. So this used to be an area where there was like a living, and you had all of the workers for this mill or whatever, the Blacksmith mill, whatever you want to call it, factory there. And then after this shut down, the town basically like grew into the derelict town because there was no reason to live there. I forget what it's called. They have a bunch of these in the Rust Belt in the United States. Like, it's like all, I know this because my dad grew up in Granite City, Illinois, which used to be a steel mill town. And then after the factory shut down, it like became a very poor area. And they call all of these towns that are in these places now like the Rust Belt towns. It's like all the places in America where it used to be a lot of money because there was factories. And then they left, and it's like literally like a belt of just like rusted old towns because nobody lives there. So this is like Russia's version of that. Okay, I am so like, this is a picture of Doug Dimmadome, or whatever, Doug Dimmadome, and the fucking Nikita Demidov, and they're both wearing the cowboy hat, or like the Dimmadome, whatever that is.
I could not read about the Demidov dynasty without thinking of Doug Dimmadome from The Fairly Odd Parents, and I cannot believe that you didn't bring it up. But maybe you didn't bring it up because you're like, she's locked in, she's got to continue the story.
That's why. No, the first thought out of my mind was Doug Dimmadome, and I was like thinking of all these different meme edits, and the brain rot just like started flying.
Jimmy Turner, my name is Doug Dimmadome,
And I was like, nope, hold it together.
But like his head shape, you have to admit, that head shape would hold a hat pretty well.
I mean, it has to be that he was in his factory, hell, literally, they called it hell, and like a beam fell on his head or something and smashed him.
It's a very distinct head shape. But okay, then go to the next slide and I'll tell you some shit while you look at it. So if you pull up Molebka on Google Maps today, you'll find a statue called the Molebsky Nail overlooking the Silva River. It sits on an empty, leveled stretch of land near a small tributary. Near the Molebka Nail Monument, there are still crumbling brick structures consisting of tall arched ruins and the remnants of long warehouse-like buildings. The sculpture marks the site of the old ironworks, and the nearby ruins are the only leftovers of what was once the Demidov dynasty.
Okay.
So, you know how I said there's only 2 locations in Molebka where you can do street view? One of them is that alien statue, and one is this nail.
Yeah, I mean, this still seems like out in the middle of nowhere. Like, I'm looking at the reverse of this, and it's just like the fucking middle of nowhere. I'm surprised they even have the option to drop down on Google Maps here, you know?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because if you're from like the US or the UK or something and you're listening to this show, and I'm just mentioning those 2 countries because that's 2 of the countries where we have the highest streams, you can drop down pretty much anywhere, and you can just, you know, hit the arrow forward and you can walk along the street on Google Maps. That's not the case for this town. You drop down, and what you're looking at is just somebody that took a panorama on their cell phone. So it's not even like the Google car went through here and you can like click forward. You can't do that at all. All you can see is stuff that people have taken pictures of on their cell phones. So then if you go to the next slide, you can see the old ironworks ruins. I mean, it's kind of impressive that they're still standing, but I think it also speaks to how poor the town eventually became because they haven't even been able to fully eliminate these like centuries old structures.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I like ruins, and I like things that are abandoned. I don't know, I just like it feels like weirdly nostalgic, like even though I was like a time that I wasn't even from, or I have no relationship to this fucking building of bricks, but for some reason I feel like that same like tingly feeling when I look at it of like, oh, home, you know? It's like, okay, sociopath, you don't even fucking know that building, like shut up.
There is something really cool about abandoned buildings. They just feel like time capsules. They're just frozen, and you can walk through it and be like, wow, there was an indentured servant who worked here and hated his life, and every day he woke up and saw the glowing red embers raining down from the ironworks on his house that caught fire once a week and thought to himself, wow, this sucks. And then eventually it ended. So when the Demidov dynasty eventually crumbled, many locals felt that it was the result of cosmic karma or even a curse brought upon the family through generations of evil deeds. The Demidovs could honestly have their own entire episode, but for now we're going to move on from them and look more closely at Molyobka itself. During the time that the ironworks was in operation, there were thousands of residents, though exact numbers are hard to pin down. But after an economic crisis led to the factory's closure in 1904, population steadily dwindled down to what it is today. After the closure, Molyobka would once again experience tragedy when the Russian Civil War made its way into the region from 1918 to 1919. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, the country collapsed into a brutal civil war. The Red Army was made up of Bolsheviks who wanted to overthrow the old system and build a communist state. The White Army was a loose coalition of anti-Bolshevik forces, including former imperial officers, monarchists, and conservatives who wanted to destroy the Reds and restore some version of the old order. Russia then fractured into massive battle zones called fronts, and the Eastern Front, which stretched across the Ural Mountains and into Siberia, became one of the bloodiest. Control of this region mattered because it connected European Russia to Siberia and contained critical industry, railways, and supply routes. As Red and White forces surged back and forth across the Urals between 1918 and 1919, entire villages were swallowed up by the fighting, whether they wanted to be involved or not. By the time the Russian Civil War reached Perm Krai, Molyobka was already suffering. The ironworks had shut down, jobs were gone, and the population was shrinking. Then, in 1918, the Eastern Front of the Civil War surged through the region as White forces advanced west across the Urals before collapsing under a Red Army counteroffensive. Control of the area changed hands quickly and violently. Soldiers moved through villages like Molyobka not as tourists, but as desperate men in need of food, shelter, and manpower. They confiscated crops and livestock to feed their troops, kicked people out of their homes, farms, and businesses so soldiers had a place to sleep, and they even forced men in the village to join their ranks when too many of their soldiers had died and the troops needed more people. Eyewitness accounts describe terrified civilians hiding in forests for weeks as their homes were seized, livestock slaughtered, and men taken away under suspicion of supporting the wrong side. One eyewitness account from Perm Krai in 1918 comes from a man named Trutnev. According to Trutnev, he was at home when two horse-drawn carriages pulled up in front of his house. In one carriage, there were armed soldiers, and in the other carriage, there was nothing but corpses. Upon seeing Trutnev, the soldiers demanded, with weapons in their hands, that he give them coffins for the corpses. Frightened, Trutnev tried to explain that he had no coffins and he was just a factory worker. But the soldiers forced him to show them around his property in search of a coffin. Eventually, the soldiers saw a barrel of fermented cabbages. They forced Trutnev at gunpoint to empty the barrel, rolling the barrel back to the carriage that contained the corpses. The soldiers then proceeded to chop up the bodies and place the parts inside the barrel. Then, according to author Paul Gilbert, quote, Trutnev, accompanied by one of the killers, crossed the river by boat, where there was already a grave dug, in which he buried the container with the remains. He returned to the site at a later date, and there he erected 2 wooden crosses and looked after the grave all his life, end quote. So go to the next slide.
Yikes.
And you're going to see 2 images from the Russian Civil War. That first image at the top is actually taken in Molyobka, and then the second one below is taken in Perm Krai, but it's unclear what city it's actually from. But it just shows how starved and malnourished some of these soldiers were during the Civil War. Can you just describe them briefly?
Yeah, so the first one is an old black and white photo, and yeah, it's got like vintage cannons and these crazy like bayonet guns and those like, I guess, are those the Bolsheviks?
It wasn't captioned saying which troop it was, but this Civil War was incredibly disorganized. So there were factions being created within the Bolsheviks and factions being created within the White Party. And so it was just like every day there's something new. And so every day there's a new opportunity to accidentally be on the wrong side once a troop comes in.
Yeah, and they're wearing those, I can't remember, what do you call, like, is it like a fez? Like that hat that's like...
a Cossack hat, I believe it's called.
A Cossack hat.
hat. Let me look it up. It is called, yes, Cossack.
Yeah, and then the next photo is, oh God, just terrible, starved. You know, anytime I see a photo of someone who looks like this, like my mind automatically goes to the Holocaust because I've only been exposed to people who are still alive and that thin from like Holocaust photos. And so, yeah, seeing this here, I'm like, oh my God. My brain is immediately like, oh, that's gotta be from World War II, but this is like even before that. Can you recover from that? Like if they just like slowly get their calories back up, like will they return to being a person, or is that just like death for sure?
Yeah, you can recover, but as you pointed out, it's a slow process because you can get something called refeeding syndrome, I think it's called, where you get too many calories too fast and your body can't handle it because it's been starving for so long. But that second picture of the starving Russian soldier is actually taken by the American Red Cross. So the Russian Civil War intersected with World War I, and the American government at the time was very, very interested in the changing of the guard that was happening in Russia. And so organizations like the Red Cross were coming through to some of these places where the fighting was the worst and giving food and maybe propaganda. I don't know. I didn't look that deeply into it. And they were documenting what was going on. After 1919 and the chaos of the revolution, Molebka slowly faded into obscurity, becoming nothing more than another small, poor, rural village forgotten in the aftermath of the revolution. That is, until the 1980s. No time to cook? Same. That's why I use Factor. It makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without the planning or cooking and get Factor. Factor has 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious throughout winter with options including high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads, which I personally love. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. Factor is always fresh, never frozen, and ready to eat in about 2 minutes with no prep or stress. I love their poblano, potato, and white bean stew. To be honest with you, stew of all persuasions really tickles me because it kind of makes me feel like I'm cosplaying as a medieval princess locked in a stone tower being guarded by a weird shadow werewolf minotaur man. Can other people relate to this, or is that not cool to say out loud? I really like stew. I'm sorry. Head to factormeals.com/letsgethaunted50 off and use code letsgethaunted50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan, 1 free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. And now back to your regularly scheduled haunting. Part 2, a legend is born. The modern legend of the Molyobka Triangle begins on a cold winter day in either October of 1983 or February of 1983, depending on the source you read, when a geologist named Emil Bachurin was out in the forest on a routine hunting trip. Although he was not from Molyobka, he was born and lived in Perm Krai, where he worked as a geologist. And, like many Soviets in the 80s, he frequently carried out solo overnight camping and hunting trips in Perm's vast forests. As he stopped to take a break from the hunt, he suddenly observed a luminous sphere hanging above the treetops, emitting an intense bluish glow. He soon realized the glow wasn't coming from some distant light or star. In fact, whatever was glowing was close enough that he could see the forest canopy lit up beneath it. For a few moments, the sphere hovered silently in the trees. Then, in a flash, it zipped away and disappeared. Bachurin, astonished, trudged through the snow to the area in the forest where he thought the light had been hovering. As he moved, he felt the hair on his arms slowly stand up. Not out of fear, but almost like a static electricity was coursing through the cold air. Pushing past tree branches and stepping carefully over rocks and logs, Bachurin suddenly found himself in front of an astonishing sight. The snow in front of him was partially melted into a perfectly round imprint, over 200 feet in diameter. The snow inside this circular imprint had melted down to the ground, and the edges were sharply defined, as if something large and circular had either landed there or blasted some sort of heat source onto it to melt the snow away. There were no footprints or vehicle tracks around, and no signs of people or machinery. As he stood by himself in the quiet clearing in the woods, staring at the imprint, a strange, uneasy feeling overtook him. Bacharine would later describe this moment as him realizing that whatever he was looking at resembled a, quote, landing pad. To Bacharine, it was obvious. Whatever that blue glowing sphere he had seen in the treetops was, it must have landed here. When he eventually hiked back to civilization, he realized that his watch was now 2 hours behind what it should have been. After resetting his watch on the train ride home, Bacharine reported his experience both to his geologist colleagues at work and, eventually, to the local authorities. But in Soviet-era Russia, you couldn't just call up a newspaper and say, "I saw a UFO," as that could jeopardize your reputation, your career, and even your life. Instead, Bacharine carefully phrased his experience as him discovering an, quote, anomalous phenomenon that he could not explain, and he later said he remembered stories about local residents who had wandered around the woods in this area for several weeks as if bewitched. According to later interviews that he gave in the late 1980s and 1990s, he also informed a university and a military representative about what he had seen, but that they didn't publicize it either at the time. The only proof of his sighting was one small article that did circulate in the regional scientific community. Although not widely reported at first, this sighting by Emil Bacharine in the winter of 1983 would essentially mark the birth of the legend of the M Triangle as an identified location. So what do you think of that story so far?
Whoa. That was, my mind is just like turning over all of the different things of like, wow, he basically saw a UFO, but then he can't say he saw that because in Soviet Russia, you can't say that you saw aliens? Why?
Yeah.
Because it's like the government's like, there's not any other thing more powerful than us. Is that why?
Okay, I know the answer, but I didn't write it down, but I just love UFOs. Okay, so basically during this time in history, the Cold War is going on, and the US and Russia are both having problems with UFOs entering our airspace. And that could be an entirely separate episode, honestly, but there were instances where in Russia they had nukes pointing at the US and the US had nukes pointing at Russia, and you would have to enter codes in order to activate it, obviously, and that could have marked World War III if that had ever happened. And there's declassified documents from the Soviet era of UFOs entering above the place where Russia was storing their nukes, and the UFOs entered the correct code to launch them. And then there was nothing Russia could do. It was like about to shoot at us and like obliterate America off the face of the planet. And then the UFOs just disappeared and the nukes shut down, like just in time. This is real documents that actually were talked about last year during our Senate UFO hearings. And
is that like time travelers? I know that's a tangent. That's crazy. Did you cover this in one of your 5-hour-long alien coverage things on Patreon?
Yeah, guys,
okay, guys,
if you're
gotta
interested,
go to our Patreon.
They're so fucking long, guys. That's why TLDR, no time to explain. This is a crazy thing that happened. But yeah, I do like 6 hours of content whenever we have these UAP hearings. I don't blame anyone for not listening, but if you're interested, it's there. And so that's one of the things that happened. It's crazy.
I'm interested.
So basically during this time, the Russian government and the KGB knew that UFOs were real and that they could do nothing to stop them. Similarly, in America during this time, the US government and the CIA knew this shit was real and there was nothing they could do to stop them. The way that the Russian government approached it was, even though they knew it was real, and we knew they knew it was real because they have all these documents that eventually got declassified, publicly they were saying to people, UFOs are American propaganda. It's a distraction. It's a distraction. UFOs aren't real.
Wow.
It's just the US flying stuff into our airspace. Yeah. So if you see a UFO, no, you didn't. And don't talk about it. It's just propaganda. And that eventually would change in the late 80s. And we'll talk about why that happened in a minute. But for now, I want you to go to the next slide. And I want you to look at Emil Fedorovich Bacharine. And I'm so sorry for butchering this man's name, but I don't know how else to say it because I'm not Russian. So can you look at this guy and describe him to our audience?
Yeah, he is like a stereotypical Russian man. Like, I don't know how else to say. He's wearing that Russian hat. I think it's literally just called a Russian hat. And he's got on like a trench coat with like a thick wool underneath. And he just looks like he spent a lot of time outside in the cold. And he drinks a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, he looks weathered. He looks like he's got knowledge, secret knowledge. I would trust him to guide me safely out of the forest if, like, we were together in a Cessna plane that crashed in the forest and we both survived and, like, we needed to hike back to civilization. I would trust him to do that.
He looks like he can gut a fish. He also looks like someone who for sure would go hiking by themselves. Like, I know Allie and I, you look at us and you're like, they wouldn't go in a parking lot by themselves, you know? I'm not going fucking hiking by myself. Are you insane? This guy looks like he would go off grid for decades by himself.
Yeah, for sure. He looks like if he was in the U.S., like he would find a way to not have a social security number and just live off the land and the government. Like there would be tales of him, right? Like, oh, there's a mountain man that lives in the woods. And everyone would be like, no, you're crazy. There's no such thing as someone that doesn't have a social security number living in the woods. But it would be him.
Holy shit! This guy's taking Roy off the grid! This guy doesn't have a social security number for Roy!
So if you look at the bio I have there, so you can see he was born in Perm. He died in Perm in Molebka. He died in a house fire, which is actually really sad. But he was very educated. He went to Perm University. His concentration was geology. He worked as a geologist/mining engineer. Can you read that last sentence?
Shit, it says geologist/mining engineer worked at a field base as a cook during the search for the Dyatlov Pass hikers. That's crazy, you guys. That is a callback to season 1, episode 1, the Dyatlov Pass that Allie covered. One of the most iconic episodes we ever had. And that's crazy. So this all ties. It's all connected?
It's all connected, basically, is what I'm telling you. So the Dyatlov Pass incident, for people who don't know, there's no time to explain. You've got to go back to episode 1, experience the LGH lore from the very beginning. But very, very famous case of a mysterious death of a bunch of hikers in the Ural Mountains. Now, this location we're talking about today is also in the Ural Mountains. The Ural Mountains are extremely long. I think they're like 2,000 miles or something. But as the crow flies, this story today is only a few hours away from the site where the Dyatlov Pass incident happened. And I double checked on a map. So I know that that is true because I do love maps. But this guy worked as a cook during the search for these missing hikers.
That's crazy. And I remember specifically in the Dyatlov Pass episode, we talked about the Ural Mountains being haunted. Like people saying there was UFOs there. People saying there were monsters and things that happened there.
100%. Yeah, the Ural Mountains have their own distinct lore. And the Mansi people, like I said, they make an appearance in this story as part of the history of Perm Krai. And they make an appearance in the Dyatlov Pass incident as well. So very interesting guy, educated, doesn't seem like someone who would make up a story. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, why is this called the Molyobka Triangle? As more sightings in the area were cataloged, and we'll talk about each of those a little bit later, people ended up drawing a triangle on the map, which roughly connects 3 points across the Silva River where the paranormal activity seemed to be concentrated. 1 point is located in Molebka village. 1 point was at the prayer stone on the riverbank that the Mansi people had once used for rituals. And 1 point was deep in the forest, just past where Bachurin had seen his UFO. Thus, the area came to be referred to as the Molyobka Triangle or M Triangle, sometimes shortened to just Zone M, or perhaps in an attempt to sound more scientific, elongated to the Perm Anomalous Zone. Originally, a triangle was drawn on this map, and it's kind of how it got its name, but as time goes on and more places start being cataloged and pinpointed on maps as being anomalous, like where something weird happened, it kind of becomes more of like a misshapen oval. So, but it retained the name triangle for a couple of reasons. Because of branding, it created international appeal. The Bermuda Triangle stories were popular at the time. There were these 3 landmarks that were often pointed out, but in reality, there's many, many sites in this area associated with the phenomena. So here's the rough details that we actually know about the Molebka Triangle. It's roughly 70 square kilometers or 27 square miles. It begins along the left bank of the Silva River. It is between Molebka and nearby villages like Kamenka. The activity is densest near Molebka, and the weird stuff peaks here. And if you're watching this, you can see the coordinates of where the weird stuff peaks. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the actual shape, which is that orange kind of misshapen oval that's drawn on the map. And you know what? It looks like Demidov's head a little bit, you know?
It does.
Is that on purpose?
It's a little bit smashed. Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Was that picture trying to tell us something? Holy fuck. Wow. You guys are not going to be able to keep up with my brain just did. Okay, so that picture that we saw, the painting of him, what if that was like a fucking Da Vinci Code moment and he's trying to tell us something about where their fucking treasures hidden? Because remember the family was burying treasures outside of the factory and they found all of that. Yeah, keep up. For all of you guys who's like, Nat has ADHD, like she's can't focus. Is it that I can't focus or is that I just see everything all at once? Okay?
Nobody knows for sure, but I do feel like we just fucking brain blasted into the solution to the problem that is the Perm Anomalous Zone. I think we just figured out that is the shape of the Dimmadov guy's head. And when we get to theories, we'll talk about like some people wonder, one, is this place actually anomalous or is it just a story? I feel like that's always the skeptic perspective. And then two, if this place is anomalous, assuming it is anomalous, why is it anomalous? And some people do think it goes back to the Dimmadov dynasty, that they were just really fucking bad, evil people and the whole land is cursed and maybe they're protecting their treasure. Like maybe some of the stuff we're seeing are evil beings that are just protecting the treasure. I don't know.
That's funny to think that like people are arguing over whether an area is anomalous or not. It's like, actually, this is not anomalous. No, this is anomalous. Compared to what?
What is the baseline? Is the baseline just like a Walmart? Because that Walmart's pretty haunted if you actually think about it.
There's a huge Walmart.
But then if you go to the next map, this is the main points of interest. And I know it's written in Russian, but all of those points, 1 through 12, we're going to talk about in English. But if you just wanted to kind of describe where these clusters fall.
Yeah, so it looks like they all are kind of, well, it's hard for me to say exactly, but I guess it would be that they sort of hug the river, all of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they definitely seem to kind of cluster around the river. And then at the very top where it looks like it says CENO, Monebka, that just means the town of Molebka. So
that's how you speak Russian?
I don't speak Russian at all, guys, obviously. But like, I kind of get it now, dude. I kind of get it because I had to search Russian words in order to find sources because there's really nothing in English. And then I had to do the thing where you translate on Safari browser. You like drop down and hit translate to English. And so then I was going back and forth because translations are never perfect. And then I would send stuff I didn't understand to Christina. And yeah, that's how you spell Molebka, is Monebka.
I kind of get it, though. You guys, wow, we got to include that on the fucking Instagram photo dump. But I thought these letters were just like, I don't know, letters that didn't exist. But now I'm seeing them through Allie's eyes and I understand. And now I feel like I can read and write in Russian.
Russian language is very interesting to me. But yeah, anyway.
Russian unlocked.
Russian unlocked. I'm at a very Russian time in my life. Now we're going to go to the next slide and I'm going to tell you about it. So we just talked about why people weren't allowed to talk about seeing UFOs. Now we're transitioning into a time where people can't shut the fuck up about UFOs in Russia. So what happened? Throughout the mid-1980s, Molebka remained relatively low-key. The Cold War was still on, and the Soviet mainstream media wasn't yet ready to delve into UFO stories. But behind the scenes, Bacharine's report was intriguing enough that a few groups of enthusiasts and scientists decided to quietly investigate for themselves. These were essentially unofficial expeditions full of geology students, amateur enthusiasts with dowsing rods, and local clubs visiting the site during holidays to see if they could spot something. In their own small way, they were laying the groundwork by mapping the area's strange spots and keeping logs of any weird sightings. But it was all within a small circle of people and findings weren't widely published. Then everything changed. In the mid to late 1980s, the Soviet Union began a period of sweeping reform under Mikhail Gorbachev, known as Perestroika, meaning restructuring. Its goal was to loosen the rigid political and economic system that had defined Soviet life for decades. Closely tied to this was glasnost, or openness, which encouraged transparency, freer journalism, and public discussions of subjects that had long been suppressed. Together, these reforms weakened the culture of secrecy that had made it risky or even outright dangerous to speak publicly about unexplained phenomena, government failures, or fringe scientific theories. This shift is crucial to understanding why the M Zone suddenly exploded into public consciousness in the late 1980s. Strange lights and eerie stories around Molebka had existed for years, even decades. But under Glasnost, they could finally be printed in newspapers, investigated openly, and debated without immediate ridicule or punishment. By this point, UFO fever had swept through the country. Suddenly, newspapers were printing previously taboo paranormal stories, and TV shows discussed the paranormal openly. Out of this supernatural frenzy stepped a journalist named Pavel Mukhortov, who essentially blew the Molebka story wide open to the public. In the slide we're looking at now, it's just a political cartoon. It's Mikhail Gorbachev standing on the rubble of the USSR, and he's holding this flag that says Glasnost and Perestroika, which just means openness and restructuring.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty deep. It's got me thinking.
I know. Look, this is low-key an educational episode, even though it's about, like, weird devil men, as we're going to get into very shortly.
Educational.
President Reagan challenged the Soviet Union to offer a dramatic signal on human rights to underscore its new policy of openness.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
You guys, this is the episode that you tell your parents about. You know when you bring your significant other home to your parents and like you want the version of them that's not like the stupid slut that you love. It's like the good, like academic, like cares about their job, like, you know, whatever. Like the version that you bring to your parents, right? Like this podcast episode is the version that you can bring to your parents. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah, you don't bring paranormal games to play in the dark to your parents. That's too weird. That series we do. You don't bring sex magic to your parents, which is an episode we did last year. You're going to bring them this one because there's some stuff that is actually history. You know? It's history.
Well, I guess it's not that wholesome because we
did
spend the better half of the first episode. Okay, never mind, guys. But what if your parents are freaks? Then they'll like it.
They might like this one. Pavel was a journalist from Soviet Latvia with a passion for the unexplained. And he got wind of Emil's UFO sighting during this time of openness in journalism, and the whispers of an anomalous zone in Perm reached his ears. Sensing a great story, he publicized the Molebka phenomenon to the press, writing articles that captured readers' imaginations, and suddenly many mystery enthusiasts across the USSR learned that deep in the Ural Mountains there was a place that you could go to potentially see UFOs, glowing orbs, and even Yetis. And we'll talk more about the Yetis and cryptids later, but this was very exciting because it was sort of like a guarantee. If you go to the M Zone, you're gonna see some freaky shit. And people were real stoked about freaky shit during this time because they had come from a very repressed culture where this stuff was not in the news at all to the floodgates opening, and all of a sudden there's TV shows about UFOs and there's articles being published about aliens coming down and talking to people.
Американский город Розвелл вновь оказался в центре внимания мировых СМИ. В погибших инопланетянах засекретили.
So basically, 1989 was a watershed year. The Soviet media that summer was already buzzing with the famous Voronezh UFO landing story, where Russian children claimed that aliens and a robot came out of a spaceship in a city park. So go to the next slide.
Okay. Oh, wow. It says, on September 27th, 1989, a group of children in Voronezh were playing soccer in a park when a large red sphere landed in front of them. The door to the craft opened, and two 12 to 14-foot aliens with 3 eyes wearing silver suits, accompanied by a robot, descended from the craft. And then there's a lovely illustration of this happening of like a giant 12-foot alien with a robot behind him and another 12-foot alien behind him with 3 eyes and silver suits all looking down at this kid like, what's good, bro? Wow.
This could be an entirely separate topic because the kids involved in this story were interviewed. There were multiple kids. They're just playing in this park. This orb comes down. These beings step out of it. There's a whole narrative that goes along with the story. That's not really important to our story. What is important is that this was published in 1989 and people loved it. People were like, oh my God, aliens are real. UFOs are real. For years, we were told it's just American propaganda. Don't talk about it. But oh my God, it's real. And they're coming to us. They're coming to Russia to talk to our children and interact with us. And people were really excited. So it was kind of the perfect storm because you have Perestroika, you have glasnost, you have this highly publicized story in Voronezh, and then you have Pavel, this journalist from Latvia, and he publishes all these articles about the Molyobka Triangle, and people were pumped. Now, like I said, this brought tourism all of a sudden to this really small town that was derelict, as you said, did not have a lot of opportunity, not a lot of industry. And it was kind of a mixed bag because the people in Molebka that were used to living this kind of rural, quiet lifestyle all of a sudden found their town overrun. But what can you do? You got to make lemonade from lemons, right? So in Perm, the local authorities tried to take an open-minded approach, and they helped form something called the Perm Commission on Anomalous Phenomena, or PCAP, which was a team of scientists and officials that would investigate strange events reported in the region, which is kind of cool. Like, the government isn't saying, hey, you're crazy. They're saying, all right, you're saying weird stuff is happening in the Perm region. We're going to form this coalition with very official, educated people, and we're going to investigate every time somebody reports something in our area. In July of 1989, this commission organized a major expedition to Molebka. This expedition was official as fuck and included geologists, physicists, and even some military and Secret Service KGB folks in an unofficial capacity. The results of these experiments carried out by the commission seemed to point even more toward the paranormal. For example, on the night of July 29th, 1989, some team members on the expedition said they felt a sudden pressure in their heads when they entered the coordinates of one of the anomalous sites, as if an invisible helmet had suddenly been put on their heads and was squeezing them. The sensation was so uncomfortable that some team members were worried that their heads might explode from the pressure. Then, team member Alexander Goryunkin performed a time measurement experiment, placing a mechanical watch inside of a thermos and leaving it alone in the spot where Baturin had seen the blue sphere. When the team came back to retrieve the watch, they discovered that it had apparently lost 5 hours and 41 minutes of time. Could the area be some kind of portal or bubble where time behaves strangely? You guys don't understand. I'm so pumped about this. I'm caffeinated.
How many Adderalls are you on right now?
No, it would be cooler if I was, but unfortunately, I don't know why. This story, the Russian UFO stories, I love them so much. Soon, media coverage explodes more than it already had. Newspapers all over the USSR started calling Molebka the Perm Triangle, drawing parallels to the Bermuda Triangle. One article referred to it as Russia's Devil Triangle, calling it a place where the normal rules of physics don't apply. By 1990 and 1991, as the Soviet Union collapsed, the story had even seeped into international media. Foreign UFO journals and writers in the UK and the US eventually picked it up, dubbing Molebka Russia's Area 51 and Russia's Roswell.
Whoa. Wow. So we had Pine Gap, which was Australia's Area 51, and now we have the Zone, which is Russia's Area 51.
I know. It's kind of cool. Yeah, good callback. That's how seriously people were taking this location. It wasn't just like kind of a funny folklore urban legend. It was like, no, something weird is happening here. Besides this international press starting up, most importantly of all, people started traveling here. A wave of researchers, both amateur and professional, descended on Perm. From 89 to 91, dozens of paranormal teams from all over the Soviet Union visited the M Triangle. Enthusiasts from as far as France and Japan reportedly made the trek as well, hoping to have their own UFO sighting, and the quiet village of Molebka suddenly saw tent camps of scientists, college students with Geiger counters, and even psychics trying to sense energies. One local recalled these years as, quote, our quiet backwater turned into a carnival of UFO people, end quote. By the early 90s, literally thousands of so-called paranormal pilgrims were visiting annually. Campsites dotted the main hotspots to the point that one report lamented it was, quote, impossible to conduct serious research. It's like a paranormal Woodstock out there, end quote. Indeed, there were even pranksters who planted fake UFO evidence by burning circles into the snow just to spice things up. Through all of this, the Perm regional government continued its tolerant stance. They didn't shut down access. If anything, some officials seemed kind of proud that their region had this fame. The late 80s were economically hard, so a bunch of tourists coming to Perm with cash wasn't unwelcome. By 1991, the term Molebka Triangle, which is another variation, was firmly established in Russia's pop culture. It was featured on TV shows about mysteries, written up in guidebooks as a place of interest, and discussed at conferences on the unexplained. In summary, the late 80s to early 90s was the boom era for the Molyobka Triangle. It went from obscurity to stardom in paranormal circles within just a couple of years. This era generated tons of sightings and data, which we're about to dive into. And in order to dive into them, we've got to talk about the key players who made the M Triangle happen. So if you can go to the next slide, I've got UFO gatherings in Molebka, if you want to describe these two pictures.
Oh my God. The first one is, wow, this is impressive. I actually don't know if this is a person or not. It looks like it's like a robot thing. I don't know, guys. It's like someone cosplaying as an alien or a robot, but they're doing such a good job that I can't tell if there's actually a person in it or if it's just like a mannequin. But it looks like they have like all of this like foil piping around them, and honestly, they're like spray painted silver. You guys, there's no way I could describe this to you. You're just gonna have to look at these pictures because
it looks like a weird spaceman.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like if you've seen the original Twister, that like device that they put out the Dorothy or whatever into the storm to like measure how big of a storm it is or whatever. That's what it looks like. It's got like fucking balls coming out of its head. It's wearing a helmet. Like, I don't know, guys, what this is. All right, next picture looks like a bunch of people in a tent. Like maybe they're giving like a lecture or something, but there is a woman there that looks like the Russian version of like Carol Baskins or something. Yeah. She has
I consider that bitch to be one of the biggest terrorists in the exotic animal world right now.
She's got like a headband around her head, like the hippie style or like Joseph from the Bible style, and is wearing a robe. Wow, slay. Okay.
Yeah, slay for sure. Yeah, there were all these UFO gatherings happening in Molebka during this time. Like we said, one local described it as a Woodstock. You know, like all these people are coming. Okay. Some of them are psychics. Some of them, there's all these accounts of like backpackers just finding naked people along the trail to these anomalous sites. And they're just like walking around naked and smiling. You know, it was very much people wanting to commune with another higher power, perhaps.
Right. Okay.
Part 3, a colorful cast of visitors. So here are the names of some of the people we've talked about so far. Emil Bacharin, he's the geologist who started it all. He was born in 1935. He was an engineer. After his 1983 encounter, he became kind of like the patriarch figure of the Perm Zone. He participated in many expeditions as an advisor. And notably, Bacharin was open to some pretty far-out explanations for what he saw. He speculated about alien telepathy influencing the zone and even suggested the anomalies might be a window into parallel worlds. His colleagues respected him for his initial discovery, though some of them teased that he, quote, got space fever. Regardless, Bacharin meticulously documented each strange occurrence and often guided newcomers to the best spots. Without him, the M Triangle might have remained just a campfire story. Then we've got Pavel Mukortov, the journalist turned ufologist who broadcast Molebka's fame. After his articles ignited interest, Mukortov organized his own trips to the area, and he's known for coordinating one of the largest 1989 expeditions. Mukortov's style was a blend of journalism and enthusiasm. He would report, but also actively try to experience the phenomena himself. Folks credit him with bringing a sense of organization to the phenomenon. He compiled early sighting reports into catalogs and might have been the first to literally draw the triangle boundaries on a map. He also liaised with foreign researchers since he spoke multiple languages, acting as a bridge between Perm Krai and the rest of the world. So in the slide, basically all you need to know about Pavel Mukortov is that he's still living. He went to the higher military political school in 1987. He had a concentration in military journalism. Randomly, he went through cosmonaut training, which is kind of cool. His career trajectory was journalist to paranormal researcher to cosmonaut. But in the interviews you watch of him, he's like, I am a cosmonaut. I know everything. I know more than you do. If you actually look into it, he's not actually a cosmonaut. I don't know why he says that. He just, I guess during that particular time in the USSR, they were taking journalists and having them train as cosmonauts so that they could write about it for like, you know, propaganda during the Cold War. So I don't know. He constantly is like, I'm a cosmonaut.
I was going to say is that your cosmonaut, I feel like, Allie, that could be you. Like what happened to Pavel, like how he started as a journalist and then got space fever and became a cosmonaut. Like, I feel like you're on that path.
Mommy.
I'm dangerously close. Then we move on to Alexander Goryunkin. We mentioned him in the 1989 Commission expedition. He's the guy with the time warp clock experiment. He was actually an engineer and assistant professor at UFA Aviation Institute, specializing in materials science. After the famous watch and thermos test where the clock fell behind by 5 hours and 41 minutes, he coined the term chronal anomaly for the zone. He even theorized about, quote, temporary chronometric fields in the area, which were basically time distortion fields. It's kind of sci-fi. There's not really a lot of science behind it. Mainstream science didn't like it at all and said it was basically something he made up. But it does continue to persist. And he continued experimenting in the 90s with different types of clocks. And sometimes he would get smaller time differences, sometimes larger, but he always got time differences.
Time differences?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't argue with that. It's like,
you can't argue with it.
Is it real or is it not?
He was doing his best. That's the thing. Like, what do you do when you're confronted by something super weird that science says shouldn't be real? Like, he was just documenting what was happening to him, and then everyone was like, it's not real. But but if it's happening, isn't it real? You know?
Right.
And then some people were like, no, what was probably happening is he was using a thermos and maybe it wasn't watertight. So maybe like water was getting into the clocks that were inside the thermos.
Every single time?
Who knows? Who knows?
That is
I'm
a
on his
mystery
side.
in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on his side. Now we've got some new players to introduce. We've got Edward Ermolov, a lesser-known name in the West, but really big in Russia's UFO circles. Ermolov was a PhD-level engineer who led some of the first scientific expeditions to Molebka in the late 80s. His approach was methodical. His groups interviewed local residents, gathering oral histories of sightings, did panoramic photography of the sky, and set up observation posts at night. Ermolov's teams also conducted medical checks, measuring blood pressure and other vital signs of team members in different spots to see if the zone physically affected people. They also used dowsing rods to scan for energy anomalies. According to Ermolov's reports, many independent methods converged on the same conclusion. Something weird was definitely going on. Local anxiety levels were high. Villagers told him about orbs that they called the orange balls and large plate-shaped objects flying through the sky. And some even said to him, quote, yeah, we see those all the time here, end quote, as if it was no big deal. Some of Ermolov's team members experienced symptoms during their expeditions. One had a sudden high fever until he left the area. Some experienced splitting headaches. And intriguingly, Bachurin himself was on one of these expeditions with Edward Ermolov, and he had his legs swell up painfully on 2 different nights after seeing strange lights in the sky. One Russian-language article on Edward had this to say about him, quote, Edward Ermolov's accounts from the M Triangle stand out because he approached the area as a skeptic and a documentarian, not a believer. During multiple expeditions, he and his teams recorded repeated light phenomena. Silent, low-flying, luminous objects that change direction abruptly, sometimes splitting or fading in place. These sightings were often shared by several observers at once and clustered in the same locations and time windows. Ermolov also noted localized instrument disturbances, including compass deviations and unstable electronic readings that appeared under calm conditions and disappeared once teams left the area. He never labeled these events as extraterrestrial, but he did acknowledge that they didn't fit into any known atmospheric or technical explanations. More unsettling to Ermolov were the human effects tied to specific sites in the zone. Team members repeatedly reported sudden headaches, pressure sensations, dizziness, fatigue, and an unprovoked sense of unease that resolved after leaving. He also logged perceptual oddities, such as time distortion and memory gaps during short walks through the area, which he initially attributed to fatigue or rough terrain, but the consistency and location-specific nature of the reports troubled him. Perhaps most significant were his findings that local oral testimony matched expedition data. Unrelated villagers across decades described the same lights, the same, quote, wrong feeling when entering certain clearings in the woods. For Ermolov, this pattern was the true anomaly. Something geographically constrained and repeatable was happening even if the cause remained unknown, end quote. Then we've got our next guy, Vadim Chernobrov and Cosmopoisk. As the 90s progressed, a lot of the initial researchers moved on, but a new generation soon took over. Vadim Chernobrov is a famous Russian ufologist who founded an all-Russian paranormal research organization called Cosmosearch, or Kosmopoisk. Molebka was one of their favorite training grounds, and they organized dozens of trips into the triangle through the 90s into the 2000s. They actually had their 70th expedition in 1999, and they recorded phantom car sounds and engine noises, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Chernobrov himself reportedly experienced odd phenomena there, and he considered Molebka to be one of the top 3 paranormal zones in the USSR. He remained convinced that the M Triangle had an underground energy or portal, and he once speculated about a, quote, window between dimensions existing in Perm's Ural Mountains. According to the Kosmopoisk website, in 1989, quote, in a special laboratory, soil and plant ash that was collected from the M zone was analyzed, and some rare earth elements were found only in this location, including the elements, and I don't know what any of these mean, zirconium, yttrium, scandium, and rhenium, end quote.
Yeah, it seems legit. Like, none of this sounds that far-fetched to me. And I don't know if that's because we have this podcast that I've just, like, heard. Like, on the spectrum of things that we have covered, this does not seem that, like, left field to me. You know? Like, oh, a place where an oral tradition from long before written human history talks about this area having, like, significance because of its unpredictable or supernatural vibes, and then later there's, like, testing there that's like, yeah, actually this place is kind of fucked up. Like, it doesn't seem that weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for listeners of our show, this is going to be, like, immediately accepted because we're a believer show. But what does make this place interesting is not the history, not the oral tradition, not people being like, my compass is spinning and there's yttrium in the soil, which I don't really know what that is. But what is interesting is that it's really well documented. So I'm actually going to show you a video in just a second. So fast forward your slideshow, go past Alexander Goryunkin, we already talked about him, go past Edward Ermolov, go past Vadim Chernobrov, and now we're on Valery Yakimov, who is one of the guys that got one. I think, honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say it. This guy got the best anomalous footage I think I may have ever seen. It's really good.
Really?
Because the lighting is good. You know what I mean? It's not like a light in the sky at night. This is daytime that he filmed something that I'm going to show you.
This photo of this guy, he's just, like, in the backwoods of Russia somewhere with, like, snow everywhere, and there's just, like, a Siberian husky in the background with a bandana around his neck just walking back. But this dog looks just like my old Siberian husky, Bog or Archer. It's crazy. Like, same markings, everything. Like, is that Bog? Was Bog there from a different time and dimension? I don't know.
It's possible. We can't rule it out. In fact,
portal.
We're ruling it in. But this guy is, Valery Yakimov is still alive, and he actually has a blog that you can read. It's, if you speak Russian, molebka.ru/blog_stalkera. And his nickname is Stalker, which is short for UFO stalker. He still lives in Perm Krai, and he still takes tourists into the M zone upon request. So if anyone out there is interested, you got to look him up. I know, it's cool. So Valery Yakimov, he is a Perm-based ufologist who spent years in Molebka. He famously captured a video of a red-orange orb in 1995, which is often shown at UFO conferences. He also talked about the psychological aspect of the M zone, noting that many visitors, including himself, felt, quote, spiritually cleansed after camping here, as if the zone's energy had positive effects, even though the orbs and discs themselves could be scary. And in his main encounter, which occurred in the summer of 1995, he and a small team were sky watching at 2 a.m. on a hill. According to his report, a red-orange orb appeared moving slowly across the sky at first, and he managed to get it on an early model camcorder later the next day. And on the footage, which has been shown in conferences, you can see what looks like an orange light. It pulsates a little bit, it shoots to the right, and then it disappears. And on the footage, he says in Russian, quote, "There it goes." And this clip is considered one of the more intriguing pieces of visual evidence from the zone. So go back to the Dropbox folder, and in the assets folder, there is a video that says Red Orb in M Zone. Click on it and just click play.
By the way, guys, this fucking PDF is like 75 pages long that Allie was just showing me, and she's like, actually, no, get back out of that now. Let's go to something different. Like,
well, don't exit it. Don't exit it. Just minimize.
Going crazy right now. Okay, now, so what am I clicking on now?
It's called Red Orb in M Zone. It's an MP4 file.
Oh, I see it.
Okay, now click play. And it's a screen recording because I couldn't figure out how to download it. It'll play in a second.
It's an r/UFOs. Oh. What? What? That is so scary. That is not a orb. That is like a giant clown's nose in the forest.
And do you see how good the lighting is? Like, it's just chilling.
You know, I've seen videos of orbs and it's always like something that looks like lit, you know, like it could be like a light or something. This doesn't look like lit. This looks like a big red ball just placed somewhere. And like, wait, oh, there, now it's kind of going transparent. Oh, and now it's back. Wow, that's so scary. Oh my God, in this one, it doesn't look like a, wow. Hold on. Wait a second. It looks like it has like a cloaking device on it. Like you can almost like make out like a bigger thing on it. That was crazy. In the last half of the video, I see what Allie means by now, like this is the best footage she's ever seen. Because at the beginning, it's just like, okay, I'm looking at a red ball, whatever, looking at a red ball. But then all of a sudden, it's almost like an invisibility cloak. Like you start to be able to see the outline of something else that looks like a giant megaphone or like a listening device or like the side of like a huge spaceship or something mechanical and large. But it doesn't look like your typical craft or whatever, but it does look like something big and mechanical and large, something that I've never seen before, you know?
It's kind of, it's crazy looking for sure. I mean, I've never seen anything like it either, although it does kind of remind me of the footage that your mother-in-law's like shaman took while she was on a walk through the woods in Ohio, which no time to explain, guys. Truly no time to explain, so I won't get into it, but it was pretty crazy. There was like a white orb in the forest and it just shoots around and disappears. So, like I said, Valeri is still alive and he still lives in Perm Krai, and I actually found and read his blog, which was super interesting, but also super long. So I just took some notes on the most interesting things he had to say. Basically, he describes the M Zone as a paranormal hotspot, and it permanently alters those who visit it. He repeatedly emphasized that visitors that he takes to the M Zone leave changed. And for him, the M Zone is actually this positive thing. So a lot of people that visit get really scared and like their legs swells up and they get a high fever and they lose time and they're wandering lost for days on end until they eventually escape. But for him, he says that in his experience, it's almost like this is a high vibrational place where if you go in with the right mindset, you can leave just feeling totally refreshed and cleansed. And a lot of people that he brings there leave with, quote, peace, emotional clarity, or a feeling of returning to something childlike and familiar, end quote. And there's all these stories of him taking people that actually have ailments. Usually it'll be like somebody that has depression or anxiety. And so they book this trip to go to the M Zone and he guides them into it. And then when they leave, they feel better, you know?
Wow.
And so
like
it could be placebo.
Spa.
Yeah, it's like, yes, it's a paranormal spa for sure. And the other note that I took says that one of Yakimov's earliest and most unsettling experiences occurred during his childhood in the 1970s when, while picking berries alone, he wandered slightly off his usual path into what is now known as the M Zone, and he suddenly felt that the world had shut down around him. The wind stopped, all sound vanished, and an oppressive silence settled in, as if he were enclosed beneath an invisible dome. Although his first reaction was curiosity, he quickly became panicked and overwhelmed by the feeling that he was being watched by something. He fled blindly toward his house, abandoning all of his belongings. Years later, his mother independently described a nearly identical experience that she had had as a child in the exact same section of the M Zone. Yakimov's first major expedition into the zone took place in 1989, just like so many others, and over several nights, he and dozens of people that were with him observed unusual activity in the sky, including, quote, stars behaving erratically and dozens of points of light darting unpredictably. Some reported seeing geometric shapes in the sky, like squares and triangles glowing silver, blue, or green that hovered above the forest several miles in the distance. These shapes appeared to dissolve when approached and reappear when viewed from a distance, evidence, and despite repeated attempts, none were able to successfully photograph these geometric shapes. But perhaps the most disturbing account Yakimov shared on his blog involves a nighttime encounter near a ravine. While walking with colleagues, he suddenly saw what he described as a tall, solid black humanoid figure standing only a few steps in front of him. Frozen in fear, he has no memory of consciously fleeing the area. He only has a memory of suddenly snapping back into awareness several miles away, still clutching his flashlight. Not long afterward, a woman at the camp approached Yakimov and described a separate encounter at the same location, saying that she had seen small, green, humanoid figures earlier during the day, which touched her and caused a burning sensation on her skin before vanishing. What do you think of that?
Humanoid, like aliens?
Yeah, she saw aliens. Little green aliens.
Ew.
I know.
I hate
creepy.
that statue you showed me at the beginning. I hated. If I saw that, I would never be okay.
I'm not okay after researching this clearly because of the amount of slides I have. So then we move on to Mikhail or Maxim Shishkin. I'm pretty sure his name is Maxim, but some stuff said his name was Mikhail. His book, though, spoiler alert, he has a book, is published under the name Maxim Shishkin. So not much is known about Maxim's personal life, but he's another local paranormal enthusiast who has been vocal about the M Triangle. And like I said, he even published a book as recently as 2019 that you can buy on Apple Books for only $4.99. It has all of these crazy pictures in it. So if anyone's interested in this topic, I definitely recommend buying it. And he claimed that he had an alien encounter in the M Triangle at a spot that he calls, quote, the Wicket. And we'll be talking about his encounter in the next section that we're about to start. And he has tons of stories and they're all insane. But a quick preview of this dude is that he has seen demons, the devil, aliens, UFOs, shadow people, monsters, strange lights, and more, all in this zone. The last two groups that visited this area are random local groups. So there was also a regional club like the Russian UFO Research Station and university groups that took turns visiting and taking photos of blue orbs in the sky. I'm actually currently in contact with the leader of the Russian UFO Research Station. His name is Nikolai Subotin, and he is the founder. And I'm working to set up an interview with him. I don't know if it's going to happen in time for this episode, but I'll try to figure out a way to include it. If not on Patreon, then maybe like in a bonus episode. But it's complicated.
That's going to make best of quotes. It's going to be like, I'm in talks with the Russian leader of the paranormal or whatever you just said. Like that first sentence you just said is definitely going to be someone's favorite quote somewhere for sure.
He's very cool. I hope that it works out and that it ends up working out, but he doesn't speak English. So I'm in this Telegram group chat with him and Christina and me, and like Christina's helping me communicate with him. He's filming something right now for a Russian language program. I don't know if it's about the M Zone or about something else, but his website for those interested is rufors.ru. And he has an excerpt from a book he wrote about Molebka published there, which is pretty interesting. And then other than those local groups, the other people who are rumored to have visited this area include military and government groups. Although unconfirmed, at the time when the M Triangle craze was at its peak, there were rumors that the military and government organizations like the KGB were conducting their own experiments in the M Zone. Some rumors even allege that the effects being felt by explorers in the area were actually caused by the KGB themselves, who could be hiding in some secret underground facility, perhaps utilizing the underground tunnels that the Demidov dynasty had originally dug. Right, now we're on to the juicy part 4, anomalous activity. So we're going to talk about what people say they see and experience. Natalia, the next several slides are pictures. Can you just describe some of these pictures briefly to the audience?
Yeah.
I'll flip through them now.
So these are pictures of outside, and they all have different captions. They say like, Perm Anomalous Zone 1995. This one says M Zone 1994. This one, has someone's name on it and their email address, like how to contact them, I guess. But it's like orbs. Like in a lot of them, there are, orbs floating, like typical orb photography. This one's black and white, and it shows like a nighttime shot, like without a flash, but you can see a really bright light in it, which I guess is a UFO. And this one says the Perm Anomalous Zone, and then there's like fog over it and just looking very ominous. This one appears to be literally a UFO in the corner, which is crazy. Like it looks like there's a metal object in the sky hovering, like a cigarette or like a disc shape. It's hard to see from what angle I'm at. And Yeah, I mean, orbs. These ones just look like a bunch of dudes like outside camping or talking, probably giving interviews about the UFOs or the orbs that they're seeing. This one says it's a visible white UFO, and it just looks like, honestly, kind of like a penis, a glowing penis in the sky, unfortunately. That's what it looks like. This one, I don't even know what I'm looking at. It's a black and white photo, but I don't know if this is like decay on the photo or not, but it looks like there's just tons of orbs like floating in the photo, which is
It's supposed to be orbs. Yeah, apparently that lady in the photo was like surrounded by orbs and she asked someone to take a photo for her. Now, the skeptic perspective is that it's just normal decay on the film, or some people even say that this is a radioactive zone, so it's like radioactivity appearing on the film. But the lady in the picture gave an interview and said she was surrounded by orbs.
I mean, it's something. And then these are some photos that look like they're taken at night or whatever. And there's, like a glowing sphere. And, these are just like early orb and UFO photography. This one's kind of interesting because when you zoom in on the orb, it almost looks like a smiley face or something inside the orb.
Some of these orbs for sure look like they have personalities. Like, are these little fairies flying around? I don't know. Is there like a dude operating the orb inside of it?
There's one of a guy on a snowmobile at night. It looks like, someone just taking a flash photo of someone on a snowmobile. And then in the background, there's a UFO. And this one says UFO landing site. At the place where the UFO landing was recorded, there were protolins, traces of which were not found, and it looks like melted snow with something that I guess landed there. This one says UFO in the clearing, shimmering balls enlarged by optical zoom of the camera, distance about 5 kilometers. Yeah, and it's like a line of lights. I mean, another line of lights in a clearing. It says UFO in a clearing, UFO early in the morning. Yeah, these are lines of lights. These photos, I mean, there's definitely something there.
Yeah.
And I remember from Dyatlov Pass episode, people talked about lights in the sky. And this is interesting to me. This one looks like a horseshoe in the sky, but maybe it's just a really old camera. So it's like, that's for sure like a disc in the sky. Very creepy. And then we get to a very unhinged slide that says Minotaur's house. House.
You're going to love this one. All right, so table that. But yeah, basically, there's just all these photos people have taken of weird things in the sky. And I really can't emphasize this enough. This is the middle of nowhere, which is why I spent the time at the very beginning showing all these pictures of what the town, quote unquote, looks like. Like, there's less than 400 people that live here. The Perm Anomalous Zone itself is way, you have to hike so far into it. There's no trails. There's no way to like drive a car into it. And so these lights cannot be a neighboring village on a mountain or something like that that just look weird in the fog. It's so far in the middle of nowhere that there's no way it can just be human stuff. Now, skeptics point towards natural phenomena that we'll talk about in a second, but believers and fun people say this is proof that UFOs are real, aliens are real, and they're visiting the M zone for whatever reason. We just showed a bunch of pictures of UFOs and light anomalies. There's also time distortions and missing time, which we've talked about. There's encounters with Yetis and Bigfoot. So I'm just going to read 3 paragraphs to you real quick, Natalia. Bear with me. UFOs and light anomalies. This is what put Molebka on the map. Witnesses ranging from villagers to visiting scientists have seen unidentified flying objects in various forms. Common are the glowing spheres or orbs of light, which usually appear orange, red, or blue-white. These orbs can be as small as a few inches or as big as a car. They've been seen darting through the trees and even performing what looks like intelligent maneuvers. For instance, a group of 3 orbs moving in a triangular formation or lining up in a perfect row before zipping off. People have also reported seeing classic disc-shaped objects, which are the stereotypical flying saucer. In one case, a group of campers at night described a silent, disc-like craft with rotating lights that hovered above a field and then shot upward so fast that it vanished within 1 second. In 2003, witnesses saw a spindle-shaped orange UFO that hung in the sky for several minutes. Photographic evidence is usually blurry, skeptics point out, but I don't think that's true. I mean, how could you photograph a light in focus that's far away from you? I don't think that really matters. But there are some intriguing photos and videos that are more close up. For example, that 1995 Yakima video of the red orb that I showed you. Expedition notes from people who have visited the zone talk about orbs that, quote, played hide and seek with them. And the orbs would approach when people stood still, but if someone tried to walk closer, the orb would recede or extinguish entirely. So it's almost like the lights have a mind of their own. And of course, multiple UFO sightings have been reported above the zone too, bright objects zipping across the stars, some shaped like barbells, some shaped like cigars, some shaped like horseshoes, and that all of these objects make impossible turns. For time distortions and missing time, we've already recounted the famous experiment where a mechanical watch lost over 5 hours of time in a short duration, but there are personal experiences too. Visitors have told stories of entering a particular spot in the forest in late afternoon and coming out of the trees thinking only an hour had passed, but they find that it's actually the next morning, and they have no memory of the missing hours. For example, one anecdote involves a group of hikers in 1991. They followed a light thinking it was another team's campfire, and they didn't find the other camp, so they eventually gave up. By the time they returned to their own base, they realized that it was 4 a.m., not 11 p.m. like it should have been. They couldn't account for the missing time and felt disoriented, as if in a dream. There's also the reverse happening. Clocks sometimes run too fast in certain spots. Another angle is spatial disorientation, people walking in what they swear is a straight line, only to end up back where they started. Reports of sound distortion have also been cataloged. Some visitors hear a distant sound that sounds a little bit like a shout or a gunshot, but they claim that it sounds slowed down or sped up, as if the world around them was a tape on the wrong speed. There's also...
That's creepy. You know what it's reminding me of? And this is like such a scary movie to me. In Alice in Wonderland, where she's like gets stuck in the weird part where like that fucking bird is like sweeping up the trail behind him, and like all that infuriating, creepy stuff is like happening around. That's what it's reminding me of, and it's scary.
Alice in Wonderland was so frustrating for me as a child because, like, what do you mean? Like, none of these creatures want to help her get out? The stupid Cheshire cat, that's clearly a pervert, is just like smiling at her in the trees and shaking its butt, and she's like crying. She's a child, and the cat's like, oh, just have a good time, and like disappears and reappears. I hated it so much. And dude, fuck the caterpillar. That caterpillar made me so mad every time it came on screen. Pervert vibes for sure. Also just super high but mad. If you're high and mad, you need to rethink what drugs you're taking. It is not agreeing with you. Okay, but moving on. Encounters with Yetis and Bigfoot. Molebka has its fair share of alleged creature sightings. The most famous is Russia's Yeti, which is often called the, quote, big snowman or Bigfoot. Multiple expeditions in the 80s and 90s.
I'll be the decide of that. So.
Yeah. Well, let's see if this is flooding the plains again for her. If it doesn't, then the Minotaur's house is for sure going to do it. So, multiple expeditions in the 80s and 90s reported large humanoid footprints in the mud or snow. Some heard heavy bipedal footsteps snapping branches at night while they were trying to sleep in their tents. A few even claim visual contact with a tall, hairy biped with long arms slipping between the trees at dusk. While none managed to catch photos of the, quote, big snowman, this was taken seriously enough that some teams specifically looked for Bigfoot evidence while they were in the triangle. Paranormal researcher Igor Dmitrovic even dedicated years of his life to cataloging Yeti encounters in the M zone. There's also encounters with ghostly apparitions in this area. On several occasions, groups described seeing very tall, dark silhouettes at a distance, humanoid in shape, but perhaps 7 to 8 feet tall. These figures sometimes stood observing the campers, and if approached, they would step away into darkness or simply vanish altogether. The 1989 Perm Commission noted that farmers in Molebka had reported seeing, quote, huge headless figures moving fast on the edge of their fields. While it's unknown what these shadow creatures are, those who see them definitely feel that they're not human, which to me, I'm like, yeah, obviously, if you see like a headless dude, that's not normal. If he's like moving still.
Not human.
Yeah. Like, come on. All right, now we move on to the Minotaur house, which you're looking at a picture of. The Minotaur's house, also sometimes referred to as simply the, quote, haunted house, is the name given to the ruins of an old forester's cabin found within the M zone, where people have reported seeing both ghosts and monsters. These include a forester spirit, which is described as basically a phantom lumberjack seen chopping wood and then disappearing, and the truly bizarre woman with an animal head apparition. Multiple witnesses on different trips claim to see a female figure with the head of a goat lurking near the house, both during the day and at night. These sightings gave way to the nickname Minotaur's house, since a minotaur is a horned, half-beast, half-human creature. Other entities spotted at this site include tiny gnome-like creatures or shadow elves that dart quickly by explorers' feet, and sightings of a creature that lives where the old stone hearth used to be. According to local historian S.A. Balyavesky, the house belonged to a farmer named Mikhail Efimov until he died in 1977. The house remained abandoned but still standing until the mid-1990s when it was disassembled. Those who visit now can see the outline of the foundation of the home and the remains of a few scattered and rotten logs that used to be part of a wall. If you step onto the foundation of the former cabin, it's said to cause extreme uneasiness and discomfort in the explorer and increases the chances of seeing ghosts, cryptids, and creatures that still live there. Before it was torn down, ufologist Nikolai Subotin went to the Minotaur's house and wrote about his experience. Natalia, can you read this quote that's on the slide?
Yes, it says, quote, "The place was beautiful and unusual. Forest on all sides, a small house on a high riverbank, and somewhere down below, about 100 meters away, the fast and warm Silva River flows. We go inside. There is neither floor nor ceiling, only load-bearing beams eaten away by wood-boring beetles. In a dark corner, a stove reduced to its very foundation, the object of intense interest for anomaly researchers. It is here, according to their beliefs, that a certain local domovoi lives. When attempts were made to photograph the stove using a flash, the cameras malfunctioned."
Can you describe what that house looks like in that black and white photo?
Yeah, it looks like a stereotypical log cabin with part of the roof missing. It has a tiny door. I don't see any windows. And it looks like a log cabin, and then with logs as the roofs too. There's, what is that toy for kids? Lincoln Logs. It looks like a Lincoln Log house.
Yeah, it's rustic as fuck. Lincoln Logs.
In the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere for sure. So you said that according to Nikolai Subotin, he said that a local domovoi lives where the stone hearth used to be. So if you go to the next slide, I've explained what a domovoi is. So what's a domovoi? Okay. Can you read that?
Yes, it says, "A domovoi is a protective Slavic household spirit, the master of the house, who guards the home, family, and livestock, living near the hearth or the stove. They can appear as small, hairy old men, a cat, or even a family member, and while benevolent if honored with offerings like milk or bread, they become mischievous or malevolent, making noises, pinching, or smothering people if the home is untidy or the spirit is disrespected." Wow, I love that. And there's a little illustration here, and it's kind of it looks like a hairy little man. I'm supposed to be a domovoi, but it reminds me of what is that? Not Dr. Yeah, it's Dr. Seuss, that dude, that orange fat guy with the hair. What is that thing?
I speak for the trees. It's that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, the Lorax.
He's the Lorax. Yeah, he's mad about capitalism.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yep, exactly right. So apparently that dude is located in the M zone. Then if
He's
you go to
cute.
he is cute. I know it's kind of hard to be scared of him. He's cute. What do you think of? Did any of that kind of flood the plains at all for you?
A little bit.
Get you a little excited.
I do love a classic lumberjack who's just chopping wood. The goat man's not doing it for me. Something about goats has just never attracted me to them. I'm here for the idea of a demon minotaur type man, but goats, no. A goat head, no. Sorry.
Goats are pretty scary looking if you look in their eyes for too long. It's something's in there,
They're stupid.
Their eyes, their pupils are rectangular, and that is scary to me. If you combine that with a human, that's not good, it's one thing to see a goat in a place a goat should be and it has no human features, but once you start combining things, it feels a little like Frankenstein's monster.
What about a human head on a goat body? I don't like that either.
No. Oh, that made me really upset. Okay, so apart from seeing UFOs, have people seen actual aliens? Yes. So here are my favorites that I found from across the internet. Maxim Shishkin had a sighting. Maxim Shishkin, we already talked about him. He started going to the M Zone in the late 1980s, but during one of his trips, he was reportedly moving through the forest during the day near one of the zone's frequently reported hotspots when he became aware of an unnatural stillness, an absence of sound. Does this sound familiar from any of the previous stories we've heard? And a sense that he was being observed. He claimed that several small humanoid figures emerged from the tree line. They were described as short, slim, and oddly proportioned. They were wearing smooth, silvery suits that reflected ambient light rather than shining on their own. Shishkin said that the beings did not walk toward him so much as appear closer than before each time he blinked, which I don't like that at all. And he felt an intense pressure in his head, followed by the sense of thoughts being placed into his mind in the form of impressions rather than language. He later said the communication conveyed curiosity and reassurance, not hostility, and the encounter reportedly ended abruptly, with the beings vanishing without a sound. Shishkin experienced a lingering disorientation for a few hours afterward, but other than that, he remained unharmed.
Placed into your mind is like, that's an interesting. Because how would you know it was placed and it wasn't just your thought? I mean, I could go get real scared on that. Like, think, oh, are my thoughts placed? Is it a false memory? You know?
Did someone incept me? Yeah, it is interesting. But it does remind me a little bit of Bacharine's initial sighting, where he's looking at this thing burned into the ground and all of a sudden a thought just enters his mind, and the thought is, quote, landing pad. Like, he just knew that it was a landing pad. But Shishkin's sighting isn't the only one. There was also in the early 1980s, before the Perm Anomalous Zone had any name or reputation, there were 2 local loggers who were working a late night shift in the forest after dark. As they moved through the trees, they noticed a soft glowing light drifting between the tree trunks, described not as a beam or flashlight, but as a free-floating flame-like orb. At first, they assumed it might be a distant campfire or even a trick of the fog. However, when the light changed direction and seemed to respond to their movement, curiosity overcame caution and they approached it. As they drew closer, this glow reportedly intensified and became more defined, and both men claimed that they could see a small figure inside the orb, humanoid in outline, as if enclosed within the glow itself. Moments later, the fire collapsed inward on itself, flaring brightly before disappearing completely, leaving the forest dark and silent again. The men at this point reportedly flee, go back to their camp, rather than investigate further. But that's interesting because when you zoomed in on one of the orbs, you said that you kind of felt like there was something inside.
Yeah, it looked like it had a face. It wasn't a face like a human face. Like, it literally looked like a smiley. It looked like a stingray's face. But that's interesting. They said that, like, while they were looking at it, like, fire collapsed inwards and it disappeared. Do they mean, like, they destroyed it with their mind? Like, did witnessing it cause it to explode and disappear or something? It was like, the timeline is ruined. Like, you weren't supposed to see me, you know? Like, what's going on with that?
I mean, if that's the case, then these aliens are doing a real terrible job, because they should know that people are tromping around in this area and stop appearing there if it ruins their timeline. But you never know.
Well, maybe they have no way to, like, communicate that. Because
that's true.
Every time they get fucked up and their timeline gets ruined, like, they can't go back and tell them, hey, don't do that.
They're just like keep trying to carry out whatever mission they have, but people won't fucking stop showing up and walking around naked and cutting down trees and doing whatever the fuck in their area. So if you go to your next slide, headless shadow beings. So this comes from G. Medvedev's sighting. Around the same time the Molyobka Triangle was making headlines, other bizarre humanoid encounters were being reported elsewhere in Perm Krai. In July 1989, at around 4:30 in the morning, multiple workers near the village of Andronovo, including a milkmaid, a fireman, and a stable hand named G. Medvedev, independently described seeing tall, fast-moving humanoid figures with long arms and no visible heads. In Medvedev's report, he says that he saw a, quote, very fast-approaching humanoid, tall, with short legs, long dangling arms, and headless with broad shoulders running at a very high speed, end quote. These sightings were classified as headless shadow entities and were taken so seriously that they were documented and compiled in a Soviet UFO case report that was made public after the fall of the Soviet Union. Although these reports weren't from the village of Molebka itself, they fed into the growing sense that something very strange was happening across the entire Perm region.
Wow. The fact that they took it so seriously, though, first of all, respect, but also, like, it kind of reminds me of the episode you did on the Pelicaras?
Yeah, from Brazil.
Yeah. No time to explain, but basically in that episode, you know, people were reporting that there was weird stuff going on in the woods, and the government took it really seriously, and everyone took it really seriously. And this is kind of what it's reminding me of. Like, the earlier stories you were talking about was just sort of like, almost like folklore, like, hey, this is what people say, and like, this is an oral tradition, and like, now in modern times, like, these are stories that have happened, but the government was like allowing it, but not necessarily like running studies on it, and now they're doing like reports on it.
I know, which is kind of cool. Yeah, like there's real verifiable reports on some of this phenomena, which is kind of cool. And then as for more generalized phenomena reported in the M zone, there were health effects. Like we said, people describe an onset of symptoms, headaches, nausea, dizziness, in some cases unexplained fever or weakness. For example, during a 2005 research trip, 2 members were hit with high blood pressure and fever out of nowhere. When they left the zone, they quickly recovered, which is kind of weird. So it's not like they just had high blood pressure or were sick. And we talked earlier about how Bacharine, his legs swelled after encounters with orbs on 2 separate occasions. There's also cataloged electromagnetic anomalies. For example, compasses spin uselessly in certain areas of the M zone. Radios squeal with static or lose signal at certain spots. In one case, a dosimeter, which is a radiation detector, just outright malfunctioned and gave no readings until the team left the M zone, when it magically started working again. During a different 2005 expedition, flashlight bulbs started burning out and camera batteries drained far faster than normal, as if something in the M zone is sucking the energy out of electronics. There's also tons of photographic oddities. Even when nothing visible was seen with the naked eye, people later found weird artifacts in their photos. In the days of film, sometimes bright streaks or orbs appeared on developed pictures. In the digital era, groups capture images of transparent balls that they may or may not have been able to see to the naked eye. These look like semi-transparent orbs with snowflake-like internal structures, or sometimes if you zoom all the way in, some people think they see creatures on the digital images. There's a different example from an expedition in 2005 where a group took shots of an empty glade, and the pictures show faint white spheres or misty humanoid shapes forming within the glade. Also reported are the so-called, quote, dark balls with white centers that show up on photos. They're often called witches' rings by locals because they appear near an area called the Witch's Meadow. There's also strange effects on gravity and air in the M zone. A few rarer reports include feelings of levitation or heaviness. For example, as explorers walk around the woods, they may encounter spots where it feels like gravity's getting lighter and they're almost floating through the area they're in. But in a few more steps, they suddenly feel an oppressive heaviness that makes it almost impossible to continue. Some have even mentioned air pressure changes, like ears popping as if on an airplane while standing perfectly still in one of the clearings. At one area in the M zone called the White Mountain, people describe spontaneous pockets of cold air and even seeing spontaneous sparks appearing in the midair around them as if static electricity is discharging. There's also auditory phenomena known as sound mirages. This is one of the stranger recurring reports from the Perm Anomalous Zone. It involves visitors describing, quote, phantom engine noises. There are tons of reports from the late 1980s through the 1990s where hikers and researchers spending the night in the M zone say that they hear the distinct sounds of heavy engines, often compared to a diesel truck, a tractor, or low-flying aircraft, coming from deep within the forest, or in some cases coming from underground. The noise was described as steady and mechanical. It doesn't sound like anything natural, not like wind or animals, and sometimes the sound seems to move, growing louder and then fading as if passing nearby, despite the area being remote with no roads, industry, or flight paths at low altitude. In several accounts, witnesses claimed the sound could be heard while visibility was clear and there were definitely no vehicles or lights present, and attempts to walk toward the noise result in it either receding or stopping abruptly. No physical source has ever been identified for these strange mechanical noises in the woods. Others have reported hearing voices that seem just out of intelligible range, like a whispering dialogue in the distance that you can't quite make out, which stops when you try to move closer to it. A group in the 1990s said that they heard what sounded like groans or howls from the ground at night in an area with some old mine shafts, as if there are creatures living in this area underground. The term sound mirage is used because the sounds behave oddly, sometimes appearing to approach you or encircle you before fading into silence abruptly, almost like the forest is playing tricks on your ears.
Wow. All of those things were, yeah, like very supernatural, very haunted, but also like just allowable enough that you could talk yourself out of it. You could be like, oh, well, my ears, you know, there was like some sort of pressure thing and my ears popped. Could have just been my ears pop, you know? Oh, like, yeah, it's called like the Witch's Meadow and people lose track of time there, but like maybe people just weren't paying attention, you know?
I know, but combined with the photographic and video evidence, it's still pretty cool.
Look, I'm not a skeptic. I think it's very cool. I think that it not being concrete, it makes it even more haunted, because it's like, you can talk yourself out of it. Where if a humanoid comes up to you and touches you, you are like, I know what I know. I saw what I saw. You know, I'm either crazy or I'm not. Where with that, it's like almost like gaslighting. Like the haunting is like gaslighting you.
Yeah, the M zone is gaslighting you. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Sometimes the subtlest of hauntings are the most creepy, like a misplaced item or a strange feeling or a weird light in the sky or a sound that encircles you and then disappears. The underground stuff is really creepy to me for some reason, maybe because of the history with the Demidov dynasty and also the KGB possibly using underground tunnels. It also is reminding me, no time to explain, but we did an episode a few years ago called Mechanical Sounds in the Forest, which is, I guess, a known phenomenon that happens in forests to people. It's like a form of haunting. So now we're going to go through these sites in the forest that people point out. Like on that map that we looked at, there were those points on the map. So these are the most anomalous areas. Yes, the points of interest. So point 1, which appears on the map, is the Ravine of Fear. The Ravine of Fear, which you can look at in the next slide, is a deep gorge that explorers must walk through as they travel from the village of Molebka to the deepest parts of the anomalous zone. Many paranormal investigators believe it to be the creepiest place in the entire M zone. At night, you can see misty spheres and ghostly orbs drifting throughout the air, and those who have camped here overnight say that it's not unusual to experience a sudden and inexplicable wave of fear and impending doom. Can you just describe the photo really quickly, and then we'll go to the next one?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's called like the Ravine of Fear, but it's like a muddy creek with animal footprints in it. It looks like raccoon or something was there. And then there's like a bridge with like part of the bridge is broken. But I was thinking, like, when you name something Ravine of Fear, like, it's got to look like the Grand Canyon or something. This is literally like I would walk my dog.
Well, it is.
Here,
it's way bigger than this. It's just some guy took a picture while he was in the Ravine of Fear.
Oh. Okay, so the Ravine of Fear is not just that broken bridge.
No, that would
like
be
a
kind
foot
of hilarious.
bridge. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that picture, you guys can see all the sources for these pictures we're going to go through right now, but most of the pictures come from Pavel Raspopov. He has a vlog. A blog. It's written in Russian. He also has a YouTube channel that's all in Russian, but I did put the links down below. Okay, now we're moving on to Site 2, the Stone Pyramids. This is one of the most famous spots in the M Zone. It's known as the Stone Pyramids and consists of 3 small, carefully stacked stone formations in a remote area. UFO researchers claim they're arranged in geometric patterns and believe the site emits some kind of astral energy, even suggesting it functions as a navigational marker for UFOs. However, not every explorer is impressed by the so-called stone pyramids. In a blog post by Pavel Raspopov, who I just referenced, he went to the M Zone several times. He took a picture of these stone pyramids that I'm showing you now, and he wrote on his blog, quote, "In my opinion, this is a rather unimpressive landmark. It has been surrounded by all sorts of fantastic beliefs. Some believe it to be the remains of an ancient religious monument built by the Mansi people. Others point for an alien navigation system. Supposedly, these stones emit narrowly focused energy streams, but when I first saw these quote-unquote pyramids, I was disappointed. They were just a few piles of haphazardly stacked stones. In reality, it's more likely that a house once stood here and that these quote-unquote pyramids are the remains of flagstones from the foundation. A pit is visible nearby, and it's likely the former cellar of whatever structure once stood here," end quote.
Yeah, I mean, they look like cairns to me. You know what I'm talking about? Where like people go hiking and they just like stack the stones for art or something, and they like piss off other hikers who are like, no, hiking is actually like
it confuses the wildlife. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Whatever. It kind of looks like that. It is. Who am I to say? Maybe the people stacking the fucking cairns on the hike actually are nefarious, and they're like the Tartarians, and they're like making spires with the rocks to
my God
harness the free energy. I don't know.
Whoa.
Who am I to say?
I now believe that. That's from our previous episode if you guys didn't listen to it. Okay, now we're moving on to Area 3 is the Minotaur's house, which I'm not going to show you another picture of because we already saw it. But I did want to add one more story that Maxim Shishkin wrote about in his book about the Minotaur's house. He said that one night while walking past the house with a group of explorers, they saw a large humanoid figure over 3 meters tall. It was faintly glowing around its outline. It was human-shaped but distorted with an oversized head and no visible neck. As they were watching this creature emerge from behind the Minotaur's house, a loud cracking sound followed as if the bones of the creature were breaking. And when this loud cracking sound rang out, the group entirely fled the area because they were like, fuck that, which I think makes sense. Then, if you guys are looking at the map, areas 5, 4, 6, and 7 on the map are all clustered together, so we're going to talk about them at the same time. So the next slide shows number 6 on the map, and that is the Central Glade. The Central Glade sits at the literal and symbolic heart of the Perm Anomalous Zone and has long served as the main base camp for researchers and paranormal enthusiasts. Its wide open terrain provides unobstructed 360-degree visibility, making it ideal for night observations of lights or movement. Despite its current use as a campsite, the glade was once a place where people lived. In fact, you can even see several wooden houses stood here in the past. The only remains of the evidence of that settlement today is usually dense rosehip bushes growing where foundations once were. About 100 meters away in a nearby ravine, there was once a village ice cellar. Going back to Shishkin's book we referenced earlier, on the same night he saw that weird humanoid at the Minotaur's house, a psychic member of his expedition group said that she received telepathic information from an alien while walking through the Central Glade. According to this premonition, I know, this is about to get weirder. According to this premonition, a UFO was supposed to appear at midnight in the Central Glade. The group camped out, and at midnight, a dark, fish-shaped craft could clearly be seen hovering above the glade. It started to lower itself closer and closer to the group over the course of 12 minutes when suddenly a huge gust of freezing wind blew through the glade. It started to rain and the craft simply vanished. Then, around 4 a.m., when most people in the glade were still asleep, the members who were still awake witnessed a red glowing dome land quietly on the far end of the glade. Before they could move, a, quote, panicked man with square eyes ran screaming through the glade, waking everyone up. As everyone sprang from their tents to see what was going on, the red dome disappeared and the man with the square eyes was never located. As daybreak hit over the glade, everyone in the group reported experiencing a feeling of disorientation, cold chills, severe headaches, altered perceptions of time, fragmented memories, and one man was even bitten by a snake, and that man had gotten real haunted with it. He decided to sleep on top of the foundations of the Minotaur's house, I guess, and like when the people that were camping at Central Glade went to go find him, he had been bitten by a venomous viper in the night, and the group kind of took that to mean like, yeah, he disrespected that old man creature that lives in the foundations of the furnace, and so and so he got bit. Adjacent to the Central Glade is a spot that is called the Astral Glade. It's number 5 on the map, and supposedly psychics sense the presence of various invisible paranormal entities at that location, but I could not find a picture of it. Moving on, spot number 4 on the map is known as the 3 Birches. At the edge of the forest near the entrance to the Central Glade, you can find 3 birch trees with a memorial plaque hanging from them. The plaque is dedicated to Emil Bachurin, the discoverer of the M Zone who has since passed in a tragic house fire. This location was chosen because UFO researchers noted that this is the warmest place in the M Zone. Many sections of the M Triangle can have unexplained cold spots and shadows, even on otherwise sunny days, but these 3 birch trees are always warm. Ufologists relate this to Russian folklore, which says that birch trees absorb negative energy and protect people from evil spirits, thus making it the perfect place for a memorial to Emil. Moving forward to the next slide, we've got site number 7, Eurus's Glade. When interest in the zone first began to surge, this secluded clearing was used as a campsite by a man from Riga named Eurus. It lies tucked away off the main path, hidden from the hiking paths. Visitors claim that, at times, a low rumbling can be heard rising from beneath the ground here, as if something is moving around below the earth. The trees immediately surrounding this glade are unusual in that the tree trunks appear to have all been snapped off cleanly at the same height, although the trees behind them are unaffected. The trees that are snapped in half have remained that way for at least 40 years, and they don't die, and they don't regrow their tops either. Paranormal investigators have hypothesized that the tops of these trees may have been sheared off by one of the balls of light so often seen in the area, or by some large craft attempting to land in the glade. The only other notable characteristic of this area is a small well found in the ravine between the Central Glade and Eurus's Glade. It is unknown who built the well or what it was used for, but the water, which has been tested, is no longer safe to drink. Moving on to the next slide, we've got the Glade of Horrors. This small clearing...
Whoever names these is going hard, and I'm here for that.
I'm here for it too. I know, and these are kind of like the universally agreed upon names, because some people will have different names for them, but this is like the universally agreed upon name.
It's just funny to imagine somebody going on like hiking and they're like, where are you going? And it's like, well, I think I'm going to hit like the Ravine of Fear and then probably the Glade of Horrors and then get back in time for lunch.
Exactly, yeah. Get back in time to go hit up the Minotaur's house to leave an offering of milk and bread to the creature that lives in the foundation. Yeah. All right, so spot number 8 on the map, the Glade of Horrors. This small clearing is located on the bank of the Silva River, slightly downstream from the campsite areas. Some Molebka visitors tell stories about an entity that lives here, and the English translation of the entity is slip. Slip is described as a kind of invisible energy presence that people say can be sensed when there's fog that forms within the glade. Hikers report the eerie sense of being watched by whatever slip is. According to a book about Molebka written by Maxim Shishkin that we've been quoting from, this glade is known for, quote, infamous for sightings of devils, glowing apparitions with distorted faces, and phantom figures appearing here at night. At one point, wooden crosses were erected here, sparking rumors that alien bodies might be buried beneath them and that the crosses were placed to protect hikers from having to interact with them. Behind the Glade of Horrors is a spot known as the Witches' Rings, which is the next slide. The Witches' Rings is a place located at the cliff at 60 meters above the river level. Photos taken in this place often show a fuzzy dark ball with a white spot in the center that's known to appear here at night. It's known as a location where these rings, or witches' rings, appear in photographs. So I guess if you go to the witch's ring, like, you can basically just see these weird orbs appear. And there are all these rocks that are placed in circular patterns, and it's kind of unclear what those are. Yeah, it's pretty. Some people say that these were placed by hikers to protect them from the witch's ring. Other people say that it's just always been there and they don't know why it's there. But it does look very pretty, and the view is very pretty as well.
Yeah, and there's a picture with the orb, and the orb, once again, you zoom in on it, and it looks like a stingray's face.
It looks pretty crazy. And again, it reminds me of that video you showed me of your mother-in-law's friend going through Ohio forests and seeing this weird thing in the sky. Yeah. So then moving forward to place number 9, Scopino, which is the next slide. On this picturesque clearing in the southern part of the M Zone, there once stood a small settlement called Scopino. Scopino wasn't just any village, though. It was a, quote, old believer settlement. Old believers were Russian Orthodox Christians who refused to accept church reforms introduced in the 1650s. These reforms changed rituals that seemed minor on the surface, like how to cross yourself in church. Apparently, these people believed it should be 2 fingers, and the new teachings said it should be 3. Other things they disagreed with were how many times to say certain prayers and how to spell Jesus' name. But to believers at the time, these were apparently spiritually catastrophic, and many old believers believed that the reforms that the church was undergoing marked the coming of the Antichrist, and that the official Russian church had fallen to the devil. Because of their, quote, old beliefs, these people were persecuted by the state and church. They were fined, imprisoned, exiled, or executed, and those who could fled to remote regions of the country where it would be difficult to find them, such as in the M Zone. These communities deliberately isolated themselves, living quietly and devoutly until many of them simply vanished over time. In 1900, records show that Scopino consisted of 6 households with a total population of 34 people. Today, no trace of the settlement remains apart from a few overgrown foundations, and it's described by hikers as feeling like a liminal space with emotional imprints left by the people who once lived in the area. It's described as feeling like a, quote, energetically sad and lonely place, which makes people passing through the area feel uneasy or like the land is almost begging them to stay to keep it company. Similarly,
that's so desperate.
I know.
Of the land. Yeah.
Please live here. Please. I used to have 34 people here. Now there's nobody. I know it is kind of desperate. Similarly, some have reported feeling disoriented when walking through Scopino, feeling heavy or like they need to stop and rest. They report that it feels hard to get back up and keep walking, again making some wonder if the land is trying to hold them there, which is kind of creepy.
It's making a lot of sense to me, you know? I just think it's so funny to think of like land being desperate.
Land.
It's we're not going to spend too much time here because it's like really clingy, this land, and it like wants to know what we are, even though I'm literally just on a walk.
It's like really trying to get me to marry it and stay here, and like I barely know it. It's like sort of desperate. Yeah. It is also kind of sad, though, to think about land being lonely. I don't know why. I just always associate land with, like, not wanting humans to be there. Like, it just wants to be itself and be wild and free, and then humans come and put houses. But I guess this patch of land is really looking for some new humans. Yeah, it's thirsty. Moving on to site number 10, we have Snake Hill, a scenic hill with tall grass. UFOs and strange fiery lights in the sky can be seen forming above this hill with regularity. One Russian school project I found online describes how to reach Snake Hill by passing through the remains of the abandoned settlement Skopino, and from there, you walk along dry marshland and enter a dark tunnel-like forest path formed by overgrown branches. After about 200 meters, the forest opens up again, and Snake Hill lies just beyond it. One website describes the hill as, quote, a picturesque place with a beautiful view and the river flowing underneath it. To reach the top of the mountain, you need to climb a narrow, steep path that runs almost along the edge of the cliff. At the top, there's a flat platform for tourists. Snake Hill is arguably the most beautiful spot in the zone, and not far from Snake Hill is a place that ufologist Maxim Shishkin refers to as the Gates of Shambhala, or the Wicket, where he had his alien encounter. Again, if you go on Google Maps, you can drop down on Snake Hill with your little street view, but all you're going to see is just what pictures people have taken, but that's kind of cool. You can drop down there if you guys want.
I like that. The Wicket, this photo you have for the Wicket looks very haunted and very like fantasy adjacent. It looks like, you know what it kind of reminds me of? I don't know what update this was. This was a long time ago. Fortnite, maybe it was 2020, maybe it was 2019, where Fortnite had like a cube that dropped in and like no one knew what it did or what it was at first because it like didn't do anything. It was just there. The Wicket. Yeah, it's looking like to me.
The vibes are very similar. Place number 10 on the map is the Wicket. The anomaly known as Kalika, the Gates of Shambhala, or the Wicket, is one of the strangest and most psychologically intense sites described in the M Zone. First written about by Maxim Shishkin in 1996, it is said to appear only under specific lighting conditions, most often around midday, when sunlight falls into a narrow forest hollow. Witnesses describe seeing what looks like a translucent, road-like opening or doorway, suspended in space, visible only when the eyes are unfocused. People who enter the hollow often report feeling frozen in place, surrounded by unseen movements and whispers, as if something is observing them closely. Several expeditions attempted to photograph the Wicket from a distance, but instead of capturing a shape, all they could record on film was a sudden wall of dense fog, described in the caption as a, quote, living mist. The mist was not visible in real life, but completely obscured the Wicket in the photo. Perhaps most strange of all, the fog in the photo was only present in the pixels that would have shown this translucent doorway, while the surrounding forest remains clear. Shishkin notes that this fog behaves almost like a defensive, interrupting observation rather than passively existing. People who have somehow been able to cross into the Wicket report the experience of feeling followed while inside of it. They also hear muffled sounds, disorientation, they have time distortion where minutes feel elongated, they have the feeling of being watched, they see a creeping fog that crawls along the ground towards them as if it's alive, and they experience an urge to leave without understanding why. People standing near the Wicket describe a pressure change in the air, a sensation of heaviness in the chest, and the sudden feeling that the space in front of them is deeper than it should be. Photographs taken in the area capture vertical light beams, cellular or honeycomb-like structures, luminous phosphorescent humanoid forms suspended above the ground or water. In several documented cases, attempts to photograph the phenomenon from a distance resulted in the dense localized fog that I told you about. And despite vivid descriptions, no consistent physical explanation has ever been confirmed. This is also where Shishkin had his weird alien encounter that we talked about earlier. To me, this is like the coolest spot of the M Zone, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Just because I mean, the other ones were almost like the land had a personality. It was like, oh, you know, time is slowing down here. I felt heavy here or something. That is like, okay, there's a doorway and it might be a wall and feels like someone's watching me when I'm in. Like that feels like a specific object is there.
I mean, it's kind of cool to think that you're walking through the forest and in the distance, for some reason, you're like, oh my God, there's something there, even though it looks like there shouldn't be. Like, I feel that everything is deeper here. And some people just wander into it and they see crawling fog towards them, which is scary to me. The next slide is number 11, Pyramid Mountain. Pyramid Mountain sits opposite Snake Hill on the Silva River and gets its name from its sharply sloped, almost geometric silhouette. Explorers and ufologists have reported unusual light phenomena in the area, such as faint glows, brief flashes, hovering lights seen at dusk or across the river at night. Some accounts describe lights appearing between Pyramid Mountain and Snake Hill over the Silva River, almost as if the river itself acts as a corridor or channel of energy for whatever the phenomena is. In Shishkin's book, he shares a photo taken by a research group that claims to show this energy appearing above the river on film. A few researchers have claimed odd optical effects where the mountain's outline seems to shift or flatten, and some people even think that the Pyramid Mountain is actually a home base for the orbs. Like, maybe the orbs live in the mountain and they come out at night, and that's why you can see them over the mountain so often. If you go forward to the next slide, this is the photo of these weird lights over Pyramid Mountain.
It says, an object of cellular structure above the Silva River. Experts from the creative photo group Reporter A. Najibin and S. Fomink have examined the negatives in a laboratory of the Institute of Geology and Geochemistry of the Ural branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences under a microscope and in different light, determined that both the cellular object and the beam emanating from it in the center of the frame reaching into the bushes, as well as the sun's reflection on the river in the lower right corner with the sun at the time of shooting behind the photographer's right shoulder, are not film defects and not photo montage. The experts suggest the film was affected by some kind of hard radiation. Yeah, so in this photo, there once again looks like the cube from Fortnite like 5 years ago, and it's glowing, and I guess some science people went and tested it and they were like, no, this is legit. Like, this is not, 1990s special effects on a photo. This is like a real film negative. Whatever they took the picture of, that's what it looked like.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like I said earlier, where there's that picture of that lady surrounded by black orbs. And some people say, oh, well, it's just a radiation effect. And some people say, no, it was actual black orbs. Similarly, there's some conflicting evidence, like, was this really something that appeared over the river, or is it radiation effects? Which is still pretty haunted if there's radiation in this area. Moving on to the next slide, we've got the Cosmodrome, site number 12. The Cosmodrome is one of the most remote and difficult sites to reach in the M Zone. It is located beyond Snake Hill in an area that's now heavily overgrown and rarely visited. It's apparently infested by snakes. It follows the path of an ancient channel of the Silva River, which is clearly visible in satellite images, and has forested hills rising along its edge with signs of decades-old logging activity. M-Zone folklore claims the site may once have hosted a secret, undocumented military facility, and stories persist that an expedition led by an explorer named V.A. Cherushkin mysteriously vanished here in 1909, possibly killed and buried by the soldiers stationed at the facility. The area feels deeply unsettling, largely due to its disorienting terrain, and it's made more ominous by the nearby Black River, which is associated with time anomalies, as well as the former Stalin-era labor camp known as White Mountain, located just downstream.
Oh my God, that's where I would be going to get haunted for sure.
A Stalin-era labor camp for sure. Going back to Shishkin's book for a moment, he has the following to say about the Cosmodrome, quote, legends claim it to be a frequent UFO landing area or a place where objects materialize from the astral. During one nighttime visit, a group reported the stars suddenly vanished from the sky, followed by the appearance of a massive, slow-moving metallic structure stretching from horizon to horizon above the treetops. Panic set in as the object seemed to descend on the group before a strip of starry sky reappeared and the object vanished. The author notes that even skeptics present found the event psychologically overwhelming. The next slide has that Black River we just talked about. It's an area that got the reputation for time anomalies and being a, quote, bewitched place. One story told about the location comes from a local man named Pavel Sergeev, who said in the summer of 1980 he saw a planet or star fall into the Black River, which resulted in waves of more than 10 meters high. It has earned a reputation as a, quote, bloodno mesto, which means a place where people become disoriented, lose their sense of direction, or experience missing time. Visitors often report difficulty navigating the area despite familiar terrain, reinforcing beliefs that the river corridor somehow interferes with perception or movement. Moving forward, we've got White Mountain. According to local accounts, White Mountain sits on the remains of a pre-war Soviet political prisoner camp built sometime in either the 30s or 40s. The foundations of buildings, sawmill debris, and even rusted barbed wire are still scattered throughout the grass. While in this area, people report seeing strange flashes of lights at eye level, feeling sudden cold gusts of wind in otherwise still forests, and observing glowing spheres. In the next slide, we've got VERACITY. VERACITY and White Mountain are often mentioned together, but they're not the same place. VERACITY literally means, quote, the evicted settlement, and refers to the remains of an abandoned village or outlying settlement where people were forcibly resettled, likely during Soviet-era collectivization or administrative clearouts. Today, it's characterized by open clearings, faint foundations, and the uneasy feeling of a place where people once lived and were abruptly removed. VERACITY has the darkest reputation in the M Zone. It's described as having strong psychological effects. There are reports of creatures living in the VERACITY. It's the place where the Minotaur's house is. You can often find strange patterns of perfect circles of crushed grass. It's almost like a reverse crop circle, where instead of crops in a strange pattern, it's like the absence of vegetation in strange patterns. Sometimes these pop up overnight. It's thought that these circles might be patterns left by UFOs that are landing and taking off. VERACITY can be reached by following an old Demidov-era forest clearing from the central glade, or by crossing a freezing stagnant bog near the Silver River and climbing up a steep, rocky slope. As recently as 1991, a house and farmyard were still standing there, though today only a deep cellar pit, rotting logs, and extremely tall grass remain where people once lived. Near the center of the clearing, there's apparently a twisted tree that's used by visitors as a landmark, and it's often cited as evidence of something being wrong with the place. Many researchers report intense subjective effects here, including fear, anxiety, the sensation of being watched, and VERACITY is consistently described as a site where strange phenomena and unidentified beings are encountered most often. So if you move forward, you'll see a drawing of some of these circles that appear overnight in the area, and there's the Minotaur's house down at the bottom.
The Minotaur's house.
Yeah.
The Minotaur's house is a staple. I love that. It really
is. If you go forward, you can see a gulag camps map, and I just included this to show how many gulags were in the 1929 to 1953 time. And you can see they're mostly in Perm Krai, which is that middle left part, because it was so remote. So it makes sense that there are so many remains with bad vibes here. And then I know it's super late where you are, so I just have 3 more anecdotes for you before we get to the theories. This one is called The Lost Time of 1985. This is an anecdote often retold in Russian UFO literature. A small group of geology students camped in the Triangle in the mid-'80s reported a puzzling event. One evening, around 7 p.m., 2 students left to collect firewood before dark. They walked down a trail and saw a strange mist with a faint light in it. They later recalled feeling a sudden drowsiness as they approached the mist. And the next thing they knew, they were standing somewhere in the dark with no firewood in hand. Confused, they made their way back to camp. When they arrived, their friends were in a panic. It was past midnight and the 2 had been gone for over 5 hours. But the duo swore it had only felt like 20 to 30 minutes. They had blank spots in their memory. One had a vague recollection of hearing voices singing, and the other one remembered nothing until waking up on the dark path. This is a classic missing time story. The next short anecdote I have for you is called the 1989 Scientist Camp Encounters. During the big 89 expedition, there were several nights of odd happenings. One documented incident consists of a researcher who was sitting with others by the campfire around 11 p.m. when he says he saw a tall, dark figure on the edge of the firelight, standing there and watching him. He shouted and scrambled to his feet, and others turned to look at what he was seeing, and in that second, the figure stepped back into the darkness. 3 people caught a glimpse of it. They later described it as, quote, black and huge, at least 2 to 3 meters tall with no clear features, end quote. Some likened it to a shadow of a giant, or even a shadow of a Bigfoot or a Yeti. They all searched with flashlights but couldn't find anything. This anecdote has become known as the Watcher in the Woods. And finally, my third anecdote for you. Basically, a man from a nearby village said that back in 1987, he and a friend were riding a motorcycle through the forest at night, and a bright sphere appeared above them. Scared, they stopped and parked their motorcycle, and the orange fireball started darting around near the treetops. They decided to follow it on foot since their motorcycle couldn't go into the deep underbrush. And later, they said that for several minutes, this orb seemed to intentionally lead them off the road into the woods. Then it plunged down behind some trees and vanished. It took them over an hour to find the road again. They firmly believed that this was a mischievous spirit light trying to get them lost. And then I'm going to show you a clip of the only English documentary that I found on the M Zone, Natalia. It is from the early 90s from an American TV show called Sightings. And it's where I got some of the screenshots of the people involved in this story. So I'm just going to show you a quick clip. And I have a link to the full episode of Sightings that this story appears on down in the show notes below. Like I said, only going to show a clip now because this episode is already extremely long. Roll the tape.
In the first of a series of reports from inside Russia, our search for the truth about a mysterious place known as the M Triangle.
We have a very interesting and mysterious area around the city of Perm. The incidents that happened in that area are hard to believe, so unbelievable that it is hard to compare that area to any other area of anomaly. That area is called M Triangle.
We visited with Pavel Muhartov, the journalist who first broke this story of the M Triangle. He's a man with no formal scientific training, but he believes he encountered mysterious forces in the M Triangle zone that gave him new abilities and knowledge, the knowledge that would eventually lead him to the Russian space program.
I grew up a slight man. My health was never good. I was even kicked out of the Russian military because I was too frail.
This one here is proof that he was discharged from the army for health reasons.
After I was discharged from the military, I worked for a newspaper as a reporter. I started reading letters about the M Triangle Zone.
He found documents in the archives that one of the KGB agents started to write reports to his superiors that strange phenomena started to appear.
There were many UFO sightings, sudden insanity, and dangerous levels of radiation. My editor sent me there to cover the story. Wild feelings came over me, strange photos were taken, and many in the group fell ill.
These are the photos taken at night. That's what they saw during the night, flying and hovering above them.
The M Triangle changed my life. I am no longer slight. Now I am a cosmonaut.
Eyewitnesses have reported strange craft, mysterious light phenomena, and encounters of the third kind with translucent beings. There are even journals and books devoted to the ongoing sightings in the M Triangle.
If you go to the next slide, you can see Molebka branding. In modern times, Molebka's really tried to embrace this kind of supernatural phenomenon, and they have street signs that have pictures of UFOs on them. They have signs with like an alien hand with 3 fingers that's going like something.
It's like Roswell.
Yeah, like Roswell.
In the US. The street signs and stuff and the highways like all have alien names. And
exactly. So now we're going to get into the theories. Theory number 1. Nature is wild, but not haunted. This is the skeptic theory, so buckle up as we get to all the possibly scientific explanations, and then once we have this one out of the way, we can move on to the next one. So here's everything skeptics say about the M Zone. First, geological factors. Perm Krai is rich in minerals and magnetic ores. Deposits of iron and other ores can affect magnetic fields. If there's a concentration of ore or an underground fault line in the Molyobka Triangle, it might create localized disturbances. These could potentially mess with compasses and electronics and even with the human brain, since strong electromagnetic fields can cause people to feel uneasy or even to see illusions. Some scientists wonder if infrasound from shifting geological or atmospheric conditions might be present in the M Zone. Infrasound is known to induce feelings of awe or fear and even mild hallucinations in people. Could a low-frequency hum from the ground make people see shadow figures out of the corner of their eye? It's speculative, but possible. Ball lightning and plasma. Scientists speculate that the glowing orbs have a plausible natural candidate: ball lightning or plasma phenomena. Ball lightning is a poorly understood but documented phenomenon where a glowing sphere of plasma appears during thunderstorms or electrical conditions. The Perm region is known for having thunderstorms. Some lights reported could well be ball lightning or even swamp gas. The orbs that move and then explode or vanish sound a lot like ball lightning behavior. Perhaps Molebka's geology generates plasma orbs as well. These could appear to dance and play simply due to shifting electromagnetic fields, not alien intelligence. Additionally, psychologists point out that there's no denying that if you expect a place to be haunted or UFO infested, your mind can easily play tricks on you. Suggestion in group psychology could lead to misinterpreting ordinary things as extraordinary. For example, in the dark forest, a distant car's headlights could be seen through trees, and someone yells UFO, so suddenly everyone else in the group is convinced that they saw a flying orb when in fact it was just a car on a hill. Similarly, fatigue or stress can cause time perception issues. The zone's reputation might also attract a certain personality type more prone to seeing the paranormal. Russian skeptics have weighed in on the Molyobka Triangle. For example, in 1990, a team from the Skeptics Society of Moscow visited Molebka. They reported that many things could be explained by optical illusions and natural light, and they didn't personally experience anything supernatural apart from their compasses acting up, which they attributed to local magnetite in rocks. Skeptical Inquirer magazine in the US also covered the Perm Anomalies. One theory they suggested was that the watch that lost 5 hours might have been subjected to a strong magnetic field or even temperature change causing it to slow. Another point, possibly towards a natural explanation or a skeptic explanation, comes from a lady who spent her entire childhood in Skopino, the abandoned village by Snake Hill. She was interviewed by Russian blogger and journalist Pavel Rospopov, and she said there was nothing mystical about that part of the M zone. Here's a quote from her interview with Pavel. Quote, "My childhood was spent in that very Skopino. The settlement was divided into 2 parts. Upstream, along the Silva River, there were about 20 homes. Downstream, there were about 10 houses and a barracks for logging workers. We lived in the lower part. We went to school in Upper Skopino, and when the Silva flooded its banks during spring high water, we would climb from the meadows up Snake Hill, walk along it to the end of the ridge, and then descend again by a steep path back to the fields. By the way, I never saw any snakes on Snake Hill. Behind it, however, there was a large bog where we went to pick cranberries and blueberries. And there, yes, we encountered snakes often. Pine trees grew on the hill, and there was a sort of small plateau where the village's small group of young people would gather. Beyond the plateau, there was nothing particularly interesting. Overgrowth, logging clearings, raspberry thickets, the usual. After the 4th grade, we studied in Molebka. We walked about 8 kilometers on foot and lived in a boarding school. On Saturdays after classes, we went to Skopino, and on Sundays, we hiked back to Molebka. The Black River and Veselki were already called that even back in the day. The Black River flowed out of a swamp. Its bottom was silty with bog sediment, which gave the water the dark color. The water in the old riverbed of the Silva was the same color. We explored the surroundings for many kilometers from both Skopino and Molebka. Most often, we walked to neighboring villages, went mushroom and berry picking, or helped our parents with haymaking, but I never heard of any cases of mysticism involving either adults or children." End quote.
Boo.
Theory number 2. Money. This theory says that the town is hurting for money, so its villagers capitalized on a weird story to help with tourism. Points towards this theory are accounts that at first, back in the 80s, villagers were startled by all the attention. Some were hesitant to talk. Others became minor celebrities retelling their sighting stories to the media. As tourism grew, enterprising locals began to host visitors. By the 2000s, some families opened small guest homes and acted as guides to the M Zone, often spicing up tours with local legends to give tourists a thrill. In that sense, the folklore became a bit of an asset. For instance, a local guide might say, "Over there is where my grandfather saw the forest demon with glowing eyes," regardless of how true it is, knowing that it enriches the tourist experience. This is a natural evolution of folklore. It adapts to the needs of the present. Many locals still today have kind of a wry humor about it. They live normal lives, farming and logging, but there's this running gag that they're from the village with aliens. They even erected that big alien statue, embracing the identity. Points towards this theory being true as well are the fact that the Perm region government leaned into the anomalous zone thing, and they've hosted UFO gatherings and even festivals trying to appeal to tourists. In the 2000s, Perm's regional government actively started branding Molebka as a place to visit for an out-of-this-world experience. In 2010, a special road sign was installed on the highway between Perm and Yekaterinburg. It featured a drawing of a UFO to signal the turnoff for Molebka. They also improved the roads leading to the village and set up a basic visitor center. In the summer of 2011, the town erected Russia's first and only monument to an alien, which is the wooden statue Alyoshenka. There were also a few UFO-centric festivals and raves held in Molebka around 2014, and future plans to build a sky-watching museum with telescopes were at least being discussed at one point, though it looks like that project kind of fell apart. Other than that, you can now find guest homes and bed and breakfasts in nearby villages advertising quote-unquote anomaly tours. There's at least one official tour operator in Perm that offers a 2 to 3 day Molyobka Triangle tour. He provides transport, a guide, storytelling by the campfire, and these tours are popular among Russian thrill seekers and even some foreign tourists who are into paranormal tourism. In Molebka, you can reportedly still buy on the side of the road t-shirts with alien images, I Heart Molebka, keychains, mugs with UFOs, little wood-carved aliens, etc. And this leads skeptics to say, look, this has been good business for the people of Molebka, an otherwise impoverished community. However, a counterpoint to this theory is that I actually found a blog spot by someone who visited Molebka and took a tour with a local guide. The website, for anyone interested, I'll flash on the screen right now. But they said that the alien branding has pretty much been abandoned as of 2018. And if you look on Google Maps, the image of the alien in 2021 looks really run down compared to earlier photos, like the town hasn't been maintaining it. It even looks like at least one of the benches and fence have been removed completely. In a Google Maps photo from 2024, it looks like the statue was at least repainted, but a chunk is missing from the block it kneels on. I put this as a counterpoint to the allegation that the M Triangle was made up so the town could make money off of it, because if that were true, it would make more sense for the town to invest money in the upkeep of tourist traps like the alien statue rather than letting it rot away. And I'm actually going to put a video in here from Google Maps that a taxi driver took of the alien in 2021 in case anyone's interested. All right, now we skip past skepticism and we start getting more into the believer realm. Theory number 3 is that the KGB or Russian military used the M Zone as either a training or testing area. Some researchers and locals believe that the strange phenomena reported in the M Triangle may not be paranormal at all, but actually is the result of Soviet-era military or KGB activity. During the late Cold War, the USSR invested heavily in experimental research related to psychological influence, perception manipulation, and so-called psychotronic technologies, weapons or systems theorized to affect the human nervous system without direct physical contact. According to this theory, the M Zone's reports of time distortion, paralysis, overwhelming fear, auditory hallucinations, and the sensation of being watched could be side effects of exposure to experimental equipment or training exercises designed to test human responses under extreme psychological stress. Fueling this suspicion are persistent rumors of covert military presence in the region during the 70s and 80s. Explorers have reported finding abandoned flashlights, batteries, metal fragments, and camping gear stamped with USSR military markings, suggesting that organized groups, not civilian hikers, operated there at some point. Perm Krai itself was a heavily restricted region during the Soviet period, home to at least one prison camp or gulag. Within that context, the idea that remote forested areas near Molebka could have been used for classified training exercises, experiment testing, or psychological experiments doesn't feel that far-fetched. What makes this theory especially unsettling is that it doesn't require aliens, portals, or unknown forces. If the zone was used to test technologies that induce fear, disorientation, or hallucinations, then the stories of shadowy figures, invisible presences, and overwhelming dread might represent misinterpreted human reactions to artificial stimuli. And in fact, in the 90s, when the show Sightings in the US did a special on Molebka, they end their segment by saying that that's what a lot of locals in the area told them is really going on. So I'll insert that clip now.
Off the record, a few scientists offered another possibility. They claim that the Soviet government has been secretly testing a new breed of weapons called psychotronic weapons that immobilize an enemy by creating realistic mass hallucinations. They suggest that eyewitnesses in the M Triangle may have actually seen something that wasn't really there because they were unwitting participants in a top-secret military experiment.
Theory number 4. Now we're getting a little more paranormal. The Demidov Dynasty Curse. This theory states that all the phenomena cataloged in the M Zone is due to a curse brought on by the Demidov dynasty's bloody history. Let me explain. The Demidovs built mines and factories through forced labor, secrecy, and extreme cruelty, leaving behind poisoned land, mass graves, and folklore steeped in executions, hidden prisons, buried treasure, winding underground tunnels, paranoia, and greed. Crucially, the M Zone is not the only place touched by this reputation. Other former Demidov industrial sites, including Nevyansk and Nizhny Tagil, have long been associated with reports of anomalies, oppressive atmospheres, strange acoustics, wandering lights, and persistent stories of misfortune clustering around abandoned ironworks. When viewed together, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Phantom engine noises reported in the M Zone might just be echoes of the machinery of vanished factories. Forest lights might actually be the ghostly remains of an old furnace glow or labor camps. And the disorientation visitors experience might mirror landscapes built for punishment and control. Rather than aliens selecting a random forest, the M Zone could be a land that remembers, part of a broader, cursed industrial corridor where unresolved violence and exploitation have imprinted itself so deeply that it still manifests as high strangeness today. Points possibly against this theory are that some sources claim that Alexander Demidov wrote letters to his wife about Molebka being haunted from the very beginning of his time there, which might mean that it was haunted independently of whatever dark shit the Demidov dynasty had going on. According to the website properm.ru, quote, in letters from Alexander Demidov to his wife written in 1789, he indicates that something weird was afoot in Molebka. He wrote, quote, inexplicable phenomena visit Molebka. Spontaneous glows and flashes light up the sky, which the local residents cannot explain. Fearfully, they warn us against traveling beyond the river. End quote. Arguably the most famous Perm local historian, Alexander Shartsev, found references to, quote, Moleb strangeness written in the Perm Krai archives. These records show that workers of the ironworks were so frightened that they sometimes begged to be transferred to a different Demidov factory in the town of Suksun. Shartsev also cited the Mansi legends he heard and recorded, which said that the places beyond the Molebka River are sacred to the Mansi people and are protected by spirits and unknown forces of unearthly origin. Which again might be a point against this theory if the land was already thought of as being haunted prior to the Demidovs coming in. And finally, theory number 5, UFOs/aliens. This theory states that all of these experiences discussed in today's episode point towards Molebka and the surrounding region as being an area where UFOs and aliens have frequently visited throughout history. During my research, I did come across some stories from the 1800s that sound eerily similar to Emil Bachurin's 1983 sighting of the blue ball of light. In August of 1887, residents across the Kama region of Perm Krai witnessed what newspapers at the time called a, quote, aerolite tear across the sky and break apart. Reports described sparks and fragments raining down so dramatically that some witnesses believed they were seeing, quote, rain made of fire. Witnesses compared the shape of the object to a snake's head with its mouth open, and in the aftermath, people gathered fallen fragments, treating them as unusual or even powerful, quote, heaven stones. Archival records from the 1870s and 1890s describe repeated cases of ball lightning in the area. Ball lightning, which is incredibly rare, seems to appear in Perm Krai more often than in other parts of the world, at least during this time period. One account from 1875 describes a ball lightning event during a thunderstorm that either entered or formed inside of a peasant woman's house. Witnesses said that the glowing sphere moved through the interior of the house, killing the woman and severely burning several children. Another report from February of 1896 is less scary, but perhaps more bizarre. In this report, a meteorologist who was at work recording weather conditions suddenly observed a bright blue ball of light appear in the sky. He described it as appearing suddenly in the air and, quote, glowing bright blue, end quote. The glowing ball persisted long enough for him to clearly observe it, and as the ball moved, it began to change color. The meteorologist described the ball as moving as if it had a mind of its own, independently choosing the direction it would dart in next. Then it suddenly made a loud snapping and crackling noise as it broke apart into white and yellow sparks. Modern meteorologists speculate that all of these cases we've just talked about are likely early observations of ball lightning. But believers in aliens and UFOs say that these cases actually point toward Perm Krai as a whole, and the Molyobka Triangle in particular, as being a hot spot of paranormal activity. Adding credence to this theory, it seems that many locals have always believed the area to be visited by beings from other planets. According to a 2021 article entitled Welcome to Molyobka, a Ufologist's Heaven, Author Konstantin Rozkov had a chance to talk to a woman working at the local grocery store in town. The woman told the author of the article that she had her own extraterrestrial experience while in the M zone. Quote, "I saw it last year," said the woman. "At first, I thought it was the forest burning. This is right where the zone is across the river. Then I saw it. A saucer went down. It twisted through the air like this as it fell." The journalist goes on to write that after finishing the story about the flying saucer, the woman quickly moved on to a different story, which involved her experiencing a miraculous recovery from a severe illness. Quote, "There is a 100-year-old pine in the Molyobka Zone, and I was healed by this pine tree. My husband took me there, and I was healed. I couldn't walk. I had lost my memory. Neither my arms nor my legs worked properly. He just took me there, and he set me down on a stool. Doctors didn't help. They wanted to put me in a mental hospital. But look at me now. Whatever is in the M zone healed me." End quote. The journalist goes on to say that many locals have similar stories, writing, quote, "We heard many stories. For example, from a lady at a local post office and folks working at a lumber mill. Every villager we spoke to told us about weird and inexplicable things that they themselves had encountered while living in Molebka. Some researchers even argue that just being in Molebka improves physical and mental health, noting that people from all over the world come here to cure themselves of anxiety and stress and fill up with energy." End quote.
There have been so many strange experiences here by believers and skeptics alike. Near our tent, one group saw translucent fireballs that chased them into the woods and burned them seriously. Only 17 meters from here, a glowing object stunned a research group. One of the men later committed suicide.
I was walking my grandmother home, and we both saw a red flash coming from that zone. Lots of my friends have seen that too.
Mysterious things that fly in the sky here are common. I don't even listen anymore to such old news.
I've seen these saucers numerous times. To say that they are nonsense is nonsense. We know what we see.
All of these anecdotes that we've discussed today, and these ones that I've just covered now, point towards UFOs and aliens being a real phenomenon that you can experience if you visit the M zone. So I know that was a lot of information, Natalia. Now, before I ask for your favorite theory, I'm just going to read my brief conclusion. The Molyobka Triangle offers the full package for fans of the paranormal. It's got history, from indigenous Mansi rituals to the Demidov dynasty to Cold War intrigue. It's got drama, with researchers chasing lights and people losing their way in temporal fog and women being destroyed by balls of lightning within their homes. It's got a cast of crazy characters, from hard-nosed scientists to eccentric ufologists, to locals spinning yarns by the fire. And it's got that delightful blend of creepy and zany that has come to define so much of Let's Get Haunted. So, is the Molebka Triangle truly haunted or anomalous? We've heard convincing first-hand testimonies and plausible skeptical takes, but in classic LGH fashion, we end with more questions than answers. Maybe in another 10 or 20 years, someone armed with new tech or maybe an alien visitor themselves will provide us with closure. But as of today, the Perm Anomalous Zone keeps her secrets close. Also, Natalia, I think we should visit. There's a kayaking rafting trip where you can go down the Silver River and they will point out to you all of the locations along the river.
Right after you just get telling me, like you just finished telling me about like all the worst, most traumatic stuff has happened to people here, including getting taken out by ball lightning, and you're like, by the way, we should just go for a nice canoe. Let's just go take a walk by the Gorge of Fear, or whatever it was called, and sleep in the Minotaur's house. You'll get bit by a viper, but that's not that bad compared to getting molested by a headless man in the woods.
But some people say that it takes away their anxiety and depression. And there's a lady who said that she was cured of some sort of paralysis and can now walk because she visited the M zone. Her husband carried her there and set her down under a tree and she got better.
Girl, good dick can do that too. So I don't know.
The Minotaur might be able to do that to you too.
Maybe that's why people keep hitting up this Minotaur's house. That's why you can't sleep on the floor there. A poisonous snake bit me, but it was really just like good dick.
So out of the 5 theories, Natalia, which one did you like the best? Or do you have a secret 6th theory that I don't know about yet?
You know what? I was going to say the Demidov dynasty curse, but now I just can't even remember like the tenets of it. It was really intense. And I feel like it made really good sense. But if I could really lock in, maybe I could remember that one enough. I think it's between that and the really actually just like that this whole mountain area floodplain is alive, like the land is alive. The hills are alive with the sound of good dick. And it's just really fucking with these people. You know, maybe the land is so desperate and so like horny and wants to be liked so bad that it set up the Minotaur's house there and brought the Minotaur to the Minotaur's house to bring the people. Because it was like, good dick, make the people come.
Nobody wants to live in my Scopino anymore, where the old believers were. We've got to build something new. Bring a gulag, bring the KGB underground tunnels, bring me a Minotaur. Let's make this place happen.
Needless to say, this place has everything.
Exactly.
Wow.
Great episode, Allie. This episode kind of reminds me of, I don't know, like season 2. Season where you would just go off the rails and do like a 4-part episode, and I really liked it. You know, it feels like the old LGH, so thank you very much. I'm sure there's gonna be some fan cams of you just like speeding on talking through a 75-page PDF, and like
God.
I'm sitting there looking like my eyes just like glassed over. Just the ball lightning is in my brain, exploding it because I have never taken in so much information before.
It's a
but
lot.
It was good for me.
I felt,
It was good for me.
I was just mostly sweating in the darkness while researching this. We were watching Better Call Saul, my partner and I, and we were like watching TV, and I was just like making that 75-page slideshow, and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, it's not important. It's a slideshow. I'm going to show it to Natalia. And he's like, what is this? Like the Minotaur's house? The like weird hairy man that lives in the furnace or whatever? Like, and then he just lost interest because he was like, this is insane.
I loved it. I loved this episode. It was a roller coaster of emotions. At some points I was like, I'm lost. And at other points I was like, I'm back in. I found my way back in. And then at other points I was like, oh, I got lost again. But then once again found. And I think overall I found more than I was lost. There was just a few times where I was like, either it went too hard and I just couldn't follow, or maybe I was stuck thinking about the Minotaur.
I mean, it's pretty crazy. Hey, what about that 1990s footage I showed you of the show Sightings, where there's like a guy in a trench coat that's like, let me tell you about this place in Russia. And then there's like all those dudes smoking cigarettes looking completely Russian.
How about that? How about that? You know, something about that though actually made me really want to smoke cigarettes. And you guys, if you are new to the show, welcome. First of all, if you made it to the end of this one, congratulations.
If you made it to the end, you're a genius.
But yeah. Okay, tell me, what does this mean? Is this like a synchronicity? Because what I was going to say is like, lately I've been having synchronicity, but instead of being something positive, like, oh yeah, like I keep seeing the number 12. So, you know, I'm going to invest $12,000 in this. It's like, I just want to smoke a cigarette. And I keep seeing other people do it. And you guys, I'm not a fucking smoker, but I keep seeing like, the signs keep they keep coming to me. And then so randomly I was on Instagram and someone that I'm friends with, like through a friend of a friend, like I don't even know, you know, like I follow them, but like I see them like once every 5 years. They were in Paris and they had these little tiny cigarettes. It was like a fucking toothpick. And I was just looking and I was like, oh my God, it's beckoning. It's summoning me. And I don't know what's happening, you guys. Does that mean I have a future where I become addicted to cigarettes? I don't know. That's also haunted. But
well, if you do,
the signs are there.
If you do, you go to the M Zone because it's also helped cure people not only of depression and other ailments like being paralyzed, apparently, but you can also cure yourself of alcoholism and smoking. But some people apparently are alcoholics and they just go through the M Zone naked and they erect these like tents that I did not include a photo of in the slideshow because I thought it would get us flagged and removed. And it's just a bunch of naked people in a clear tent. And apparently they made like a makeshift sauna and there's just a lot of butts. There's just a lot of butts in the photo.
God. Yeah.
In theory, really cool idea. In theory, I could be about that. Like if someone was like, yeah, we're going to go to this beautiful place in
with
Russia
vipers.
where it's just, the Minotaur's house and there's going to be a sauna. But the way you said it makes it seem not attractive at all.
It was not attractive. I'll just, if you guys want to see it, buy Maxim Shishkin's book, $4.99 on Apple Books. I bought it and I don't regret it. There were lots of crazy stories about the Wicket and alien encounters and shadow beings and naked butts.
How many reviews does it have? Is it a popular book?
I didn't see any reviews, but I think it was recently released on Apple Books. Most of these books that I reference, again, Christina had to help me find them because they're on these deep web Russian websites where
they came out in 1990.
Yes. It's a black background website with bright green, lime green writing, and it's just written in that script.
Yeah, I only like websites like that. But I digress, you guys. Great episode. So much here to think about. And I feel like the rest of the season, we are going to be talking about this episode.
So, Natalia, without further ado, thank you for going on this giant journey with me. If everyone's hoping for a long one next time, you're out of luck. I have a real tight 60-minute one that everyone's going to think is stupid because this took up too much time. So, thank you all for coming along this journey with me. Natalia, can you please do our sign-off?
Oh, man. Couldn't be anything else but BRB, gonna go to the Minotaur's house and see if we can do the Wicket.
Bye!
Bye!
Welcome to the closing credits for episode 247. This month, we would love to give a warm, heartfelt thank you to our Patreon donors who donated to us in the month of November 2025. Letters E through K. If you'd like to become a donor and hear your name shouted out on a future episode, head over to patreon.com/c/letsgethaunted, where you will not only get a shout out, but you'll also get access to episode extras, minisodes, bonus episodes, vlogs, personal hauntings, live streams, and much, much more. This month, in February of 2026, is also your last month to sign up for an annual Patreon membership with a 12% discount for either Tier 1 or Tier 2. The annual Patreon membership gives you access to all of our content for one entire year, plus you get to shout yourself out on our annual Haunty closing credits, which are featured at the end of an episode once a month. The annual membership is only available to sign up for at the beginning of each year in January and February, so make sure you sign up before the opportunity is gone. This is your last month, people. But moving on, this month we'd like to thank Echo Rain, Ed B, Elizabeth P, Ellie, Emily, Emily, Emily B, Emily B, Emily O, Emily R, Emily W, Emily C, Emma D, M Storm, Erica M, Erica A, Felicia G, Felicia G, Fenrir U, Fox in Socks, Fred H, Freddie F, Fresh Zombie, Gabrielle, Ghost of 7-Eleven, Grandma Painter, Haley C, Haley L, Holly L, Haunted Dad, Haley G, Henna, Hexylvania Snow, Hugo A, Hunter C, Hunter S, Ileana RN, Ileana RN, Inky Pop Art, I Pet Zombies, Isabel L, Isabella, It's Kelsifer, Yvonne L, Ivan L, Jackie L, Jacob, JDKP, Jamit, Jamie F, Jasmine B, Jasmine C, Jason G, J M, Jelly D, Jen M, Jenna S, Jennifer C, Jennifer W, Jenny B, Jenny Squiddy, Jesselyn, Jesse H, Joaquin E, Jocelyn, John H, Jordan L, Julia C, Julia M, Julie C, Juliet H, Justin M. C, Justine D, Kate M, Cardon 47, Caradon 47, Karen H, Karen K, Karina C, Karina C, Carly K, Carly M, Kat, Kat and Alice the Malice, Katie Cat, Katie P, K to the Win, Kayla M, Kelsey K, Kelsey L, Kelspiracy, Kimberly F, Kindred and Amber, Kittenish Kate, Kitten Purito, Corky M, Corey with a K, Christy B, Kristen K, and Kylie K. Woo, 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 woo! Pew, 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 pew. Those aren't guns, those are lasers, and they're lasers that don't harm you, and in fact, they're lasers that just shoot holographic confetti that doesn't pollute the environment because it's holographic and so it just disappears. You guys, we're so stoked to be back for yet another year of Let's Get Haunted, season 8, year 7. Can you believe it? I can't. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is the year that I'm finally starting to feel my fucking age. I tell you what, but I am so grateful for each and every one of you that continues to tune in week after week, that continues to support us. I know there are many of you who have been with us along for the journey since the very beginning. Some of you have been here for years. Some of you are new, and we love all of you equally. Thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to getting to socialize with you all over on Patreon this year. I am gearing up for my first live stream of 2026, which I'm very excited about. And just a reminder, if you're still listening and did not sign up for the annual membership option, all you have to do is head over to patreon.com/c/letsgethaunted, click on the membership tab, and then above the two options, because there is tier 1 and tier 2, above those two tiers, there's a little switch and you can toggle it. And if you toggle it on, it'll change the cost of tier 1 and tier 2 and show you what the cost would be for an annual membership. But you also get that 12% discount, which I think is pretty cool. And if you sign up for your annual membership, don't forget that I need your sound bites. I need your sound bites by the end of this month so that I can put together, like I do every year, the closing credits for the annual Haunty shoutouts where you guys shout yourself out. If you don't want to shout yourself out, that is totally fine, but I highly recommend it because it is pretty cool for us to get to hear your voices and hear how you pronounce your names, and then hopefully that sticks in our brains and we remember when we shout you guys out in our own voices. But yes, thank you all so much, and I'm really looking forward to a fantastic 2026 for all of us. And now it's time for this episode's secret password, which you will type in either the Spotify comments for one entry in the end of the year raffle and or in the Instagram photo dump comments for another entry in the end of the year raffle. This week's secret password is my planes are flooded. Love you guys. See you next week. Bye.